Chapter 1651. Who couldn't be destroyed by a single strike of his sword? Yi Xian shook his head and chuckled. His father was just like his older brother and Qing, and they were extremely arrogant. Meanwhile, the green-clothed man suddenly chuckled. Come, I'll take you to see the world. As soon as he finished speaking, he led Yi Xian towards the distance. Ming hurriedly followed them as well. The green-clothed man glanced at Ming and didn't speak. Actually, he'd intended to deal with the laws of the universe. But he'd noticed that these little girls weren't bad, so he hadn't done anything. Even though he wasn't a good person, he wouldn't kill indiscriminately. Of course, the precondition was that the laws of the universe didn't target Yi Xian to death. It wasn't that he didn't care, but he wouldn't interfere easily. A young man who suffered a little wasn't a bad person. At the very least, the current Yi Xian was much more mature than before. In the past, Yi Xian was always showy and didn't have any sense of danger. And now, he already had a heart that wanted to become stronger. It didn't take long for their group to arrive at an unknown continent. In the air, Yi Xian looked down. The mountains were connected to each other, and there was no end in sight. Yi Xian was quite curious. Where are we? The green-clothed man smiled. The endless continent, an enemy that's rather mysterious to the world. Yi Xian was quite curious. Mysterious? The green-clothed man nodded. He was about to speak when an old man suddenly appeared here. Ming's expression instantly became solemn when he saw the old man. The old man was actually at the god-destroying realm. Besides the three swords, such an expert actually existed in this universe, and I've never been aware of it. After all, the Universe Court could be said to have controlled the entire universe in the past. The old man was slightly stunned when he saw the green-clothed man, and then he hurriedly bowed respectfully. So it's sect leader Yang. The green-clothed man smiled. Let's take a stroll. The old man nodded. Please do as you please. As soon as he spoke, he left. The green-clothed man smiled. Let's go. Not long after, the group arrived in front of an ancient and dilapidated city. The city was very dilapidated, and there were broken walls everywhere. With a single glance, one could tell that it had experienced the baptism of time, and it was filled with an ancient aura. The group walked into the city. On the two sides of the streets, there were some people sitting there. There were old people, middle-aged men, and women. In front of these people, there were some small toys. That was not the main point. The main point was that these people were all at the god-slaying realm. Ming's expression became extremely solemn at the sight of this, and she gazed at the green-clothed man. The latter smiled. Only godly Reaper realm experts can come to this continent. Ming said in a deep voice, why don't we know? The man in green smiled and said, Miss, there are still many things that you don't know. Ming looked around and didn't say anything. At this time, the little white fellow on Arya's shoulder suddenly flew in front of an old man. The old man glanced at the little white fellow, and a trace of astonishment flashed in his eyes. Ancestor of spirits. The spirit ancestor. The old man's voice was soft, but everyone on the street heard it. At this moment, everyone looked over. Their gazes were filled with greed, curiosity, and seriousness. The little white fellow seemed to be used to all of this, and she paid no attention to them at all. Her gaze descended onto a small black pot. The little fellow pointed at the pot, and then she gazed at the old man. The old man said, That's a world pot, and there's a world hidden within it. The little white fellow suddenly withdrew a skewer of candied fruits and passed it to the old man. Yi Xian's expression froze. She's here again. She's going to trade candied fruits for treasures again. The green-clothed man shook his head and smiled. He patted the little fellow lightly on the head, and then he gazed at the old man and smiled. 100 strands of primordial violet chi. Deal? The old man glanced at the little white fellow. 200. The green-clothed man smiled, and then he gazed at the little white fellow. Let's go. The little white fellow didn't hesitate at all and immediately flew back to Arya's shoulder. The group of them walked towards the distance. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly said, 150. The green-clothed man didn't even turn around. The old man said again, 100. The green-clothed man stopped in his tracks, and turned to look at the old man. He pointed with his finger, and 100 strands of purple chi landed in front of the old man. The old man also pointed with his finger, and the world pot flew in front of the green-clothed man. The green-clothed man handed the world pot to Yi Xian. It's for you. Yi Xian blinked his eyes. For me? The green-clothed man nodded. The spiritual energy in the gourd is very abundant. When the time comes, let the little fellow bring some spiritual energy in, and it will become an excellent place for cultivation. You can let the Undying Emperor clan enter, and their cultivation speed will increase by at least several times. Most importantly, if there's any danger, they can immediately move away. Other than that, there should be some historical remains inside, and these historical remains are a blessing for them. Yi Xian didn't refuse, and immediately put it away. Wasn't what his father owned also his? What's there to be polite about? As if thinking of something, Yi Xian asked, then why does the old man have such a godly item? The green-clothed man smiled. Maybe he killed someone and stole it, or maybe he picked it up, who knows? In any case, it's ours now. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The group continued forward. Along the way, the people on the street sized them up from time to time, especially the little white fellow. This was the spirit ancestor. With the spirit ancestor around, cultivation would be twice the result with half the effort. Most importantly, the spirit ancestor had the ability to search for treasures. It could be said that it was the real god of fortune. Moreover, the spirit ancestor's purple chi was very helpful to experts of their level. However, those who could be in this place were not idiots. How could a person who dared to strut around the streets with the spirit ancestor be an ordinary person? Although the spirit ancestor was very tempting, no one dared to make a move. At their level, experts were very clear that sometimes, a bad cause could cause countless years of cultivation to be destroyed. Experts of their level were most afraid of karma, especially bad karma. Right then, a woman suddenly smiled and said, "Fellow cultivator, are you interested in looking at this thing in front of me?" The green-clothed man stopped in his tracks and looked at the woman. In front of the woman was a bamboo scroll. The woman smiled and said, "This is the manuscript left behind by God Yi back then. It's extremely precious and only needs 300 strands of purple chi." The manuscript left behind by God Yi. Ah Ming's interest was immediately piqued. She was about to take it, but was stopped by a mysterious force. The woman looked at Ah Ming and smiled. "Miss, this is against the rules." Ah Ming asked, "What manuscript is this?" The woman smiled. "A manuscript about martial arts cultivation. It's priceless." However, Ah Ming shook her head. The woman looked at Ah Ming. "Miss, why are you shaking your head?" Ah Ming said calmly, "This is fake." Hearing that, the woman narrowed her eyes. "Fake?" Ah Ming nodded. "It's fake." The woman smiled. "Miss, are you joking?" Ah Ming glanced at the woman. The handwriting on the bamboo scroll isn't his. Yi Xian looked at the bamboo slip. There were two words that looked very faint on the bamboo slip, martial arts. Obviously, Ah Ming had seen these two words. Right then, Ah Ming suddenly said, "Let's go." The group was about to leave when the woman suddenly smiled. "Everyone, please wait." The woman looked at Ah Ming and smiled. "Miss, you said that this is fake. Do you have proof? If you don't, you'll have to buy it for 10 times the price." Although she was smiling, it was very cold. Ah Ming stared at the woman. "Force me to buy it?" The woman smiled. "What makes you say that it's fake?" Ah Ming asked, "What if it's fake?" The woman smiled. "I'll pay you back 10 times the price." Ah Ming nodded. "You said it." The woman nodded. "I said it." Ah Ming said, since you know about God Yi, do you know about the laws of the universe? Hearing that, the woman narrowed her eyes. Ah Ming smiled. Obviously, you've already guessed my identity. The laws of the universe. As soon as he said that, everyone's eyes fell on Ah Ming. They were naturally no stranger to the laws of the universe. When God Yi was around, he was truly invincible in the world. The laws of the universe under him were also extremely powerful. Ah Ming looked at the woman. Do you need me to prove my identity? The woman smiled. So it's the laws of the universe, but I don't understand. How dare you come here? And you came alone. Ah Ming stared at the woman and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, Miss, are we not human? Arya suddenly said, I'm not human. Yi Xian was speechless. Little White quickly pointed at herself, indicating that she was not human either. Yi Xian was speechless. The woman glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. You're so weak. How did you get in? Did you get in through connections? Yi Xian nodded. I did get in through connections. The woman was speechless. At that moment, Ah Ming suddenly said, what about 10 times the compensation? The woman glanced at Ah Ming and smiled. The laws of the universe. Don't you know that the owner of this place dislikes the cosmic court the most? Ah Ming was expressionless. Do I need others to like me? As she said that, she walked in front of the woman. Swindling people in the name of the owner, have you asked us? The woman smiled. Why? Are you going to enforce the law? Ah Ming stared at the woman. What about 10 times the compensation? Are you a sore loser? The woman blinked. I'm not going to compensate. Hit me then. Ah Ming smiled. Are you trying to provoke me? The woman smiled brightly. I'm trying to provoke you. Hit me if you can. Do you dare to fight here? Do you? Ah Ming suddenly slapped him across the face. Slap. Before the woman could even react, she was sent flying dozens of feet away by the slap, a resounding slap. Everyone was dumbfounded. She really dared to fight here? After Ah Ming slapped the woman away, she pulled Yi Xian and walked behind the green-robed man. She was very obedient, as if she wasn't the one who attacked. The green-robed man didn't say anything. Yi Xian held Ah Ming's hand and smiled. Don't be afraid. Let my father handle it. He can handle it. The green-robed man was speechless. At that moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly swept over from the sky. P.S. I've been having a toothache recently. I want to live off a woman. Fellow Taoists, can you introduce me? I'm fine with anything. Everyone, don't bother with how to address the woman. Qing-er. Only Yi Xian could call her Qing-er. Chapter 1652. As the formidable aura swept over, some people in the surroundings instantly took pleasure in Chen Shi's misfortune. There was a rule in this city, and that was no fighting in the city, no matter how great the grudge. Whoever moved would die. No one dared to break this rule for hundreds of thousands of years. Even some half-step intent realm experts would not fight here. Some people's eyes fell on Ah Ming. To them, this universal law was a little stupid. That was because the stall owner was deliberately provoking her, but she still attacked. That was very irrational. Ah Ming's expression was calm. She stood behind the man in green, very quiet, as if the person who attacked just now was not her. At that moment, a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Half-step intent realm expert. The white-haired old man glanced at the stall owner. She stared at Ah Ming with undisguised killing intent in her eyes. She was careless. She really did not expect the universal law to dare to attack. This was Endless City. How dare she? The white-haired old man looked at Ah Ming. You attacked first? Ah Ming nodded. The white-haired old man stared at Ah Ming. Are you going to kill yourself, or am I going to kill you? domineering. Even knowing that this was the universal law, the old man was still domineering. Yi Xian was also a little surprised. What kind of place was this? They did not even give face to the universal law. At that moment, the man in green smiled. This is not the girl's fault. The white-haired old man looked at the man in green, and the man in green glanced at the stall owner and smiled. This girl used a fake to pretend to be God Ye's manuscript and wanted to cheat me of the primordial violet aura. However, she was exposed by this little girl, so she deliberately provoked her with words. Her heart is quite vicious and sinister. In fact, let alone this little girl, even I want to give her a slap. The white-haired old man stared at the man in green. I don't care about that. The rules here state that no one is allowed to fight. Those who do will die. The man in green smiled. Rules are dead, but people are alive. What do you think? The white-haired old man narrowed his eyes. Are you questioning the rules here? At that moment, Arya suddenly took off the strange thing on her head and looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yang, do you want to fight? I'm ready. Little White nodded excitedly. She wanted to fight too. If they didn't fight, she wouldn't be able to take any of these treasures. This was because the green-robed man had said that he couldn't casually take other people's things. However, the enemy's items were different. As long as he fought, all these people in front of him were his enemies. Since they were enemies, she could take them as she pleased. All hers. This entire city was hers. The more White Kid thought about it, the more excited she became. She almost couldn't hold it in anymore. The green-clothed man glared at the two little fellows who wished for the world to be in chaos, and then he looked at the white-haired old man and said with a smile, "The rules are unreasonable, they should be changed. It must be changed." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone in the surroundings was stunned. Change the rules? Who was this green-robed man? They actually wanted to change the rules here? Was he crazy? Even a true intent realm powerhouse wouldn't dare to say such a thing, right? The white-haired elder looked at Yi Xian. Who do you think you are? You think too highly of yourself. Meanwhile, the woman who set up the stalls suddenly smiled and said, "There are always some conceited people in the world." At this moment, the green-robed man suddenly slapped out. "Pa!" Before the woman could react, she was sent flying over 100 meters away. Not only that, but her body also crumbled. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as the crown prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? At this moment, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. Her name was Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to everyone in the ancestral hall, asking timidly, "Great Elder, my brother, Yi Xian, is the crown prince. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, not daring to look at the Great Elder. However, she did not leave. Instead, she mustered her courage and entered the ancestral hall. Once again, she bowed to the elders. "Dear elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He's fighting for the clan, and it's unknown whether he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the position. This is unfair. How dare you?" The Great Elder suddenly shouted angrily. It's not up to a little girl like you to decide whether to remove him or not. Someone, drag her away. At this moment, the new crown prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed. You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder said coldly, then flog him 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he's fighting for the clan. The clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the new crown prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of crown prince. Why are you shouting?" As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded. Yi Ling's right cheek instantly turned red and swollen. However, she didn't cry. She just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. "This subordinate will go through fire and water for the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't show any mercy. Do you understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu suddenly stopped as if he had seen something. Inside the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a youth was walking towards the ancestral hall. He was wearing a tight-fitting robe that was tattered and covered in blood. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, all the elders frowned. The great elder's eyes narrowed, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. Yi Lang did not stop there. He charged at Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooey! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian lifted his head to look at him, asking savagely, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stomped down on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced apart. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no morals. From now on, Yi Xian's position will be removed, and Yi Lang will take over. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man stood a young man with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the elders of the Yi clan. Why? Right at this moment, a slightly timid voice suddenly resounded within the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she ignored her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the hall, and said timidly, "Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince. Why did you remove him for no reason?" The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly. "This is a matter of the clan. What are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from the position. This is unfair. Impudent." The Great Elder suddenly raged. "Whether he is removed or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this moment, the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The Great Elder said coldly, "Then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed Prince Yi Lang, and he knew that his chance to show off had come. The guard sneered, "Young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince, and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about?" With that, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up, but she did not cry. She just held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the Crown Prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the Crown Prince, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I'm willing to go through fire and water for the Crown Prince, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall, so don't show any mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look out of the ancestral hall. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face instantly turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed, and he hurriedly looked at Yi Lang. Just as he was about to speak, Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Bang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly, while Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yiling's side. Seeing Yiling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yiling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage, and in the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! Chapter 1653. He'd instantly killed 2 half-step intent realm experts. This could be said to be a heavy loss to Endless City. It was a true heavy loss. There weren't many experts of this level in this world. Yet at this moment, Endless City had lost 2. No, coupled with the white-haired old man that was nailed, it was probably 3. Because everyone knew that the white-haired old man was dead for sure. Yi Xian walked over to the green-clothed man's side and said in a light voice, "Angry?" The green-clothed man smiled and said, "A little." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "What do you think?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "You want to reason with them, but they don't. Now, they want to reason, but you don't." The green-clothed man roared with laughter, "Do you know? The master of this city has actually been paying attention to this place since a long time ago. But she didn't make an appearance. Do you know why?" Yi Xian said, "Because she wants to investigate your actual situation." The green-clothed man shook his head and smiled. "They've taken a fancy to our little fellow. They want to find an excuse to cause trouble, and then seize our little fellow in a perfectly justifiable manner." Little fellow. Yi Xian glanced at the white little fellow. So, this fellow is the main culprit. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "I thought your reputation was so great that no one dared offend you." The green-clothed man smiled and said, "I usually keep a very low profile." Yi Xian was speechless. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from within the city. "Sect Master Yang, this matter was my Endless City's fault." The green-clothed man looked towards the distance and said with a smile, "Come out and receive your death." As soon as his voice resounded, his sword suddenly flew out. A hall in the distance collapsed with a bang. In the next moment, a bloody head flew into the air. Another half-step intent realm expert had fallen. When they saw this scene, the expressions of the stall owners on the street instantly became extremely unsightly. Killing half-step intent realm experts is like killing dogs. Some stall owners turned around and left. They didn't dare take that treasure anymore. They would just take it as losing money to avoid disaster. Meanwhile, the green-clothed man suddenly said, "Wait." The expressions of those stall owners froze. The green-robed man glanced at the little white guy. "Return it to them." The little white fellow blinked and turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. "Gosh, why are you looking at me?" The green-robed man shook his head and smiled. "These stall owners are innocent. You can't take their things, understand?" The little white fellow hesitated for a moment, and then she opened her palm, causing some violet energy to appear in her hand. Obviously, she wanted to use the purple aura to exchange for it. The azure-robed man glanced at the stall owners around him. "This chi is primordial violet chi. It's extremely beneficial to all of you. If you're willing to trade, we'll trade with you. If not, I'll return it to its rightful owner." Change. Everyone chose to change. This was the primordial violet chi. Not only was it very beneficial to them, but most importantly, it was very easy to exchange for other things. They were here to sell things, but these things were not easy to sell. The primordial violet chi was different. It was very easy to buy other things with it. Because it was useful to all of them. It didn't take long for the stall owners to reveal satisfied smiles. Because the azure-robed man had given them a lot of primordial violet chi, and it had far exceeded the price of their divine objects. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man bowed slightly to the azure-robed man. "Thank you, sect leader Yang." The other stall owners bowed successively as well. Actually, even if the azure-robed man didn't give it to them, this chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. They didn't dare to say anything about the primordial violet chi, but the azure-robed man had given it to them. Moreover, it was a lot. All of them were sincerely grateful. The azure-robed man patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly and smiled. This is my son. His meaning was very obvious. All of them glanced at Yi Xian, and one of the old men bowed slightly. We understand. Meanwhile, Yi Xian bowed slightly. His father had the ability to make these people respect him, but he didn't. Since he didn't, then it was best for him to keep a low profile and be humble. Meanwhile, the old man in the lead smiled lightly. Young friend, I'm Xuehu from the South Star continent. In the future, if young friend has any needs, just let me know. This old man will surely not refuse to the best of my ability. The rest of them also introduced themselves successively. This was sowing good karma. Sometimes, getting to know someone was really a good karma. After a short while, those stall owners left successively. They were very clear that it was a matter between sect leader Yang and this endless city now. No matter which side, they couldn't afford to offend. The best choice was to flee quickly so as to avoid drawing trouble onto themselves. In no time, the street became deserted. The azure-robed man raised his head and looked at the white-haired old man who was nailed in the distance. The white-haired old man wasn't dead yet, but he was already at his last gasp. Noticing the azure-robed man looking over, the white-haired old man said in a trembling voice, Your Excellency, please show mercy. Unyielding? He wanted to be unyielding too, but his strength didn't allow it. He'd already lived for so many years. Dying just like this, he was naturally unwilling. Most of the time, the longer a person lived, the more they feared death. The azure-robed man raised his head and looked into the distance and said with a smile, Endless City's city lord isn't even coming out now? At this time, a woman suddenly walked over slowly from afar. The woman's age was not old, looking to be only 16 or 17 years old. She wore a floral skirt and had a small braid on her head, looking very adorable. Yi Xian's brows furrowed slightly. This was the Endless City's city lord? The woman walked in front of the azure-robed man and the rest. She smiled slightly and said, Let me introduce myself. I'm Endless City's city lord, Hua Yi. The azure-robed man was just about to speak when at this time, Hua Yi suddenly looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, This young master, getting to know each other is fate. I have a little thing here that just happens to be suitable for young master. As she said, she opened her palm. In her palm was a palm-sized small seal. Yi Xian glanced at the small seal and said with a smile, Miss, this is between my dad and you. It has nothing to do with me. You talk to my dad. Hua Yi blinked. This item is called the Spacetime Seal. This item contains a special spacetime. 1 day inside is equivalent to 10 days outside. If young master uses it for cultivation, it'll be just right. Hearing that, Yi Xian's expression suddenly became solemn. 1 day inside is equivalent to 10 days outside? A difference of 10 times? Yi Xian was a little tempted. At this time, Ming suddenly said in a deep voice, Spacetime Seal. Hua Yi turned to look at Ming and said with a smile, Obviously, God Yi mentioned this item to Miss back then. Ming looked at Yi Xian. You can have it. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Is it really that divine? Ming nodded. This object doesn't belong to this universe. It came from somewhere else. Back then, Master mentioned it a few times, and he was full of praise for it. He once thought of making a replica, but before he could do so, the other dimensional people came. As she said that, she took the spacetime seal. I'll keep it safe for you. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. F***ck, so you're like this, Ming. Seeing Ming put it away, Hua Yi's smile became even brighter. She turned to look at the green-robed man. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Sect leader Yang, today's matter was caused by my own greed. Please punish me, young Master Yang. Yi Xian glanced at Hua Yi. This woman is amazing. She came up with gifts and apologized without even looking for an excuse. She even took the initiative to ask for punishment. This is an amazing woman. The green-robed man suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Do you want to kill her? Kill her? Hearing that, Yi Xian was stunned. Hua Yi still had a smile on her face, but there was a hint of wariness in the depths of her eyes. Kill her? This green-robed man dared to say such words. What did that mean? It meant that this green-robed man did not put Endless City in his eyes at all. This was not the main point. The main point was that even she could not sense this green-robed man's aura and strength. Hua Yi sighed softly in her heart. A wrong thought, a bad karma. Although she had already prepared for the worst in her heart, she still did not want to take that step. She looked at Yi Xian and bowed again. Young master, can this matter be settled? Yi Xian looked at his father. The green-robed man smiled slightly. You decide. Decide yourself. Yi Xian said solemnly, Dad, do you have the ability to destroy this endless city? The green-robed man smiled and said, as long as you say the word, Dad will immediately make this city disappear from this time. He said it very calmly, but it exuded an invincible confidence. The smile on Hua Yi's face gradually disappeared. Yi Xian asked again. Dad, do you think I have the ability to destroy this endless city? The green-robed man shook his head. No. Yi Xian smiled. He looked at Hua Yi. Miss, this matter can be settled. Hua Yi was slightly stunned, and then she bowed again. Thank you, young master. Yi Xian shook his head. Thank my father. Hua Yi looked at the green-robed man and bowed again. She heaved a sigh of relief in her heart. If this karma could be settled, then it couldn't be any better. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian, and there was a trace of gratification in his eyes. Actually, he wanted Yi Xian to turn this bad karma into good karma. Meanwhile, Hua Yi suddenly said, Bring her here. As soon as the voice resounded, a black-robed man appeared with a woman. This woman was the woman who set up the stall earlier. She'd fled when she noticed the situation was bad. However, she was still captured by Endless City. Hua Yi said, I wonder how Senior intends to deal with her. The green-robed man glanced at the pale woman, and the woman said with a trembling voice, Senior, please show mercy. The green-robed man waved his hand. Forget it. Hua Yi nodded slightly and asked the black-robed man to take the woman away. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, I brought you here this time because I want to show you some of the top experts in this universe. I also want to show you the world. As he spoke, he looked at Hua Yi. According to what I know, the Tao discussion conference will begin in a few days, right? Hua Yi said with a smile, yes. It will begin in 3 days. The green-robed man nodded. Leave a few spots for us. A trace of excitement flashed through Hua Yi's eyes. No problem at all. The green-robed man nodded and was about to speak. Suddenly, loud laughter sounded from afar. Where's the spirit ancestor? Where's the spirit ancestor? Ha! The green-robed man looked up into the sky and frowned slightly. Hua Yi's face sank when she heard this. It's that madman. P.S. Too poor, so he suffers from insomnia. Uncomfortable. End of this chapter. Chapter 1654. The Spirit Ancestor. Obviously, the news of the spirit ancestor appearing here had spread. Even some ancient experts at the half-step intent realm found it difficult to refuse the temptation of the spirit ancestor. Because besides the quintessence of the Grand Tao, the spirit ancestor's violet energy was the best spirit energy in the world. There were even rumors that the violet energy of the spirit ancestor could replace the quintessence of the Grand Tao. Besides that, the spirit ancestor had the ability to search for treasures. Possessing a spirit ancestor was equivalent to possessing countless treasures. Yi Xian glanced at the white little fellow, and he noticed that the white little fellow was even better at attracting trouble than he was. Meanwhile, a robust man appeared before them. The robust man was very ferocious, and his face was covered in stubble. At the instant he descended to the ground, the entire endless city trembled. Strength. The robust man gave others the feeling that his entire body was filled with strength. As soon as the burly man appeared, his eyes fell on Little White. When he saw Little White, his eyes were filled with undisguised greed. It was blatant and undisguised. As if he'd thought of something, the robust man turned to look at Huai. Does this little animal belong to Endless City now, or? Little animal. As soon as these words were spoken, Misson, who'd been very quiet until now, immediately frowned. Arya was even more irascible, and she charged forward and smashed her fist towards the robust man. The robust man instinctively smashed his fist forward when he saw Arya's fist approaching. Rumble. A powerful force suddenly erupted from the battlefield, and then the space in an area of over 50,000 kilometers was blasted apart. Moreover, the robust man was instantly pushed back explosively, and he was pushed back by over 10 kilometers. A trace of shock flashed through Hua Yi's eyes when she witnessed this scene. The robust man was a body cultivator that focused on strength, and his strength could simply be described as destructive. However, he'd lost to this little girl? The robust man was first stunned after he suffered a loss, and then he sized up Arya while a wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of his mouth. So you're a little animal as well. Die. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at Arya. Bang! This charge was like a volcanic eruption, and a destructive force smashed down towards Yi Xian and the others. Arya was about to attack again when the green-clothed man's sword suddenly flew out. Hiss! The sound of something tearing resounded. The robust man was blasted flying, and then he was nailed to a wall by a sword. Directly crushed. Hua Yi took a deep and long glance at the green-clothed man when she witnessed this scene. She noticed that she'd greatly underestimated his strength. The burly man was dumbfounded. He couldn't even take a single strike. He wanted to move, but the sword had locked his entire body. He couldn't even move a finger. At this moment, the burly man knew that he had provoked someone he shouldn't have. The burly man hurriedly said, "Sir, I was rude just now. I'm from the Divine Pavilion, so please show mercy." Divine Pavilion. The azure-robed man turned to look at Hua Yi. What is the Divine Pavilion? Hua Yi explained, a small group of about 6 people, all half-step concept. The green-robed man nodded slightly and gently cut with his fingers. Chi. The burly man's head flew off. Directly erased. Forcefully erased. He wouldn't even have the chance to reincarnate. A trace of fear flashed through Hua Yi's eyes when she saw this. This swordsman really left no leeway when doing things. This kind of person was either too stupid or too strong. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Let's go. I'll take you to a place." After saying that, he led everyone into the distance. As if he'd thought of something, he turned to look at Hua Yi. "Help me pass a message to the Divine Pavilion. If they want revenge, they should bring as many people as possible. It's too boring to kill them alone." Everyone was speechless. Soon, Yi Xian and the others disappeared not far away. Hua Yi was a little confused where she stood. In the distance, on the street. Yi Xian suddenly asked, "Dad, should we go to the alien race? I'm quite curious about that place." Hearing that, Nanjing couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian. This guy has a lot of cunning thoughts. Arya suddenly said, "Little Xuanzi, you want Brother Yang to help you fight, right?" Yi Xian said seriously, "I'm just going to walk around." Arya gave him a thumbs up. "Your ability to lie through your teeth is comparable to Brother Yang's." Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "You can solve the alien race's matter by yourself." Yi Xian was a little helpless. At this moment, the green-robed man said, "However, I can give you some help, but you still have to rely on yourself." Yi Xian's eyes lit up. "What kind of help?" The green-robed man said with a smile, "You'll know soon. However, don't be happy too early, because no matter what kind of help you get, you have to rely on yourself. Dad can take care of you for a while, but he can't take care of you forever. So, you have to work hard, understand?" Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." The green-robed man said again, "Dad doesn't like to preach to you, and you don't need me to preach to you. You've suffered a lot over the years, and you've become a lot more mature. You understand everything that should be understood." After saying that, he paused and said, "Actually, Dad has been reflecting on himself recently. I've indeed neglected you over the years. However, I know that you've never blamed me." Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at the green-robed man, a little surprised. "Why do you think so?" The green-robed man said with a straight face, "Because I'm your father." Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man blinked. "Do you have a problem?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The green-robed man laughed. "If a man has a problem, he should use his fists to solve it. Why don't we fight one-on-one, father and son? What do you think?" Yi Xian's expression froze. "We fight one-on-one?" The green-robed man nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian asked very seriously, "Do you think it's fair?" The green-robed man thought for a moment, then said, "Then I'll suppress my realm to fight you?" Yi Xian asked back, "Do you have a realm?" The green-robed man laughed. "I don't think so." Yi Xian was speechless. Damn, my dad is also thick-skinned. At this moment, the green-robed man suddenly stopped. Not far in front of them, there was a restaurant with a total of 9 floors. From the outside, the restaurant looked very simple and not luxurious at all. Yi Xian looked up and saw a shabby plaque above the second floor, 99 floor. 99 floor. There was a trace of surprise in Yi Xian's eyes. This name is a little special. The green-robed man led everyone in. As soon as they entered, an old man walked over. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and the others. "Which floor?" The green-robed man laughed. "Ninth." "Ninth." Hearing this, the old man was slightly stunned. Soon, his expression softened. 100 origin crystals. The green-robed man pointed with his finger, and a storage ring appeared in front of the old man. The old man glanced at the storage ring, then bowed slightly. "Please." The green-robed man smiled, and then he led everyone up the stairs. The green-robed man glanced at the surroundings. This 99 floor is quite interesting. The 9th floor represents the 9 levels of heaven, and each floor is a world. Yi Xian was slightly curious. "Each floor is a world?" The green-robed man nodded. "This is a place to cultivate. Amongst them, the 9th floor is the cruelest, and ordinary people aren't able to endure it." As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Xian. The meaning was obvious. Yi Xian said, "Dad, what do you want to help me improve?" The green-robed man thought for a moment and said, "Actually, I don't know." Yi Xian looked at the green-robed man. The green-robed man was slightly helpless. "You're truly too weak. I don't even know where to start." Yi Xian was speechless. Meanwhile, they'd arrived at the 9th floor, and Yi Xian was shocked the moment they pushed open the door and entered. It really was a world. He couldn't see the end of it. At that moment, Ming suddenly said softly, "You're too short-sighted." As the law of the universe, she had always thought that the universe was under their control. However, only today did she realize that the number of top-notch experts in this world was not small at all. Many of them were experts from God Ye's era. In that era, God Yi was definitely the strongest, but apart from him, there were many other experts in this world. As if thinking of something, Ming suddenly looked at the green-robed man. Senior, these people are so strong. Why aren't they helping to resist the alien races? The green-robed man smiled. Do you think they're related to the survival of this universe? Ming said in a deep voice, but if the alien races attack, how can they be spared? The green-robed man shook his head. You're wrong. If the alien races attack, they won't necessarily be in trouble. They have a sufficient understanding of time, and even among the alien races, they won't be too weak. Moreover, the alien races didn't say that they'll slaughter all the humans in this world, did they? Ming was silent. The green-robed man continued, what's the alien race's real goal? It's the origin of the great Tao in God Ye's body. Of course, they do want to occupy this universe and monopolize its resources. However, that's not important to the people here. The people here are very strong. They only have one goal, and that is to advance further. They don't need to worry about anything else. Even if this universe is destroyed, they can still survive. Ming looked at the green-robed man. What about you, Senior? As long as you're willing, you can suppress the alien races with a single slash. The green-robed man shook his head and smiled, not answering the question. Ming looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was speechless. You're making me ask again. At that moment, the green-robed man suddenly smiled. Miss, in many worlds, some small countries have wars, and every war will result in many deaths. Miss, as the law of the universe, have you ever cared about these things? Ming frowned. These are all trivial matters. Having said that, she suddenly raised her head to look at the green-robed man. Trivial matters. The disputes between those countries were trivial matters in her eyes, but in the eyes of this green-robed man, wasn't the struggle between the alien races and this universe also a trivial matter? The green-robed man smiled. Protecting the universe is too tiring. Moreover, it's a thankless task. For me, protecting my family is enough. Chapter 1655. Ming glanced at the man in green and sighed in her heart. She did not continue to ask the man in green to protect the universe because she knew that she had no reason to. Why should she ask others to protect the universe? At this moment, the man in green patted Yi Xian's shoulder and pointed to a distance, go in. Yi Xian blinked, just go in like this? The man in green smiled, what else? Yi Xian hesitated and asked, what kind of trial? The man in green smiled, you will know when you go in. Yi Xian walked in and looked around vigilantly, but nothing happened. The man in green turned to look at Arya, you will be my sparring partner. Arya blinked, Brother Yang, are you sure? The man in green nodded. Arya shook her head, I'm not going. The man in green was puzzled, why? Arya glanced at Yi Xian and said sternly, I'm afraid that I will beat him to death. Yi Xian, the man in green was speechless, I didn't ask you to beat him to death. Arya licked the tongue hulu, fists and feet have no eyes. What if I beat him to death? The man in green was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, why don't we change someone else? He found that Arya was quite unreliable. If this girl didn't know how to control her strength, she might really beat him to death. The man in green looked at Arya, there are benefits. Arya blinked, what benefits? The man in green smiled, you can make any request. Arya snapped her fingers, I will take this job. After that, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian was about to speak when Arya rushed forward. Yi Xian's face changed and he blocked with his arms. Boom! Yi Xian was sent flying. He flew hundreds of thousands of feet away, and he even crashed into more than 10 mountains that were tens of thousands of feet high. Ming couldn't help but take a look at Arya. He was a little shocked. This little girl's strength was too terrifying. In the distance, Yi Xian crawled out of a deep pit. At this moment, his body was cracked like a spider web. Yi Xian was a little confused. His physical body was a dimensional one. How could it be destroyed by a single punch? In the distance, Arya licked her sugar-coated paws and then looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, can you still fight? Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Arya, can you be gentle? Arya turned her head to look at the man in cyan robe. The man in cyan robe smiled and said, as long as you don't kill him. With that, he led the crowd away. Otherwise, he would be beaten to death. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. Damn it, I'm done for. As expected, Arya rushed out directly. Before Yi Xian could react, he was kicked in the abdomen by her. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body arched as he flew out. This time, he flew out without a trace. However, Arya didn't stop. She rushed out again. Boom! The powerful physical strength directly caused the whole world to tremble. Soon, the world rang with Yi Xian's shrill screams. Outside, Ming looked at the man in cyan robe. Senior, are we just going to let him get beaten up like this? The man in cyan robe nodded. Ming hesitated for a moment, then said, I think, he should understand more about the time dimension now. The man in cyan robe smiled and said, what he needs to do is not to understand the time dimension, but how to cut it. Ming nodded. Understood. The man in cyan robe wanted to cultivate Yi Xian into an expert of his level. Not to cultivate the realm, but to cultivate the sword. Of course, this couldn't be done in one go. However, he was slowly leading Yi Xian to the right path. 4 hours later. In the 9th floor, Yi Xian was lying on the ground, his whole body covered in blood, very miserable. Arya sat on a rock at the side, crossed her legs, and licked a candied haw. The little white guy was also there. Arya suddenly glanced at Yi Xian. Little Xuanzi, you're a little weak. I only used 30% of my strength. Yi Xian was speechless. Arya patted Little White. Heal him, I'll continue to beat him. Little White waved its little paw, and a purple aura directly enveloped Yi Xian. Almost in an instant, Yi Xian's injuries directly healed. Yi Xian was shocked. This little guy's purple aura was even more terrifying than his immortal bloodline. At this time, Arya was about to attack, but Yi Xian quickly took out a candied haw. Arya, you're also tired. How about another candied haw? Arya blinked. Are you trying to bribe me? Yi Xian quickly shook his head. No, no. I just see that you're tired, so I want you to rest more. Arya did not speak, and seemed to be hesitating. Yi Xian quickly took out another candied haw, and Arya took 2 candied haws, then rest for a while. As she spoke, she took a candied haw and handed it to Little White. Little White grinned, took it with one claw, and then began to lick it. Seeing that Arya did not attack, Yi Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He sat next to Arya, and then said, Arya, your physical strength can destroy the time dimension? Arya was a little curious. The time dimension? Yi Xian blinked. You don't know? Arya shook her head. I don't know. Is it very awesome? Yi Xian, while chatting with Arya, Yi Xian found that Arya did not know what the time dimension was. She only cultivated her physical strength and physical strength. She did not care about anything else. She did not have a realm. Of course, she was not at the level of his father, but she was still very terrifying. After a while, Yi Xian and Arya continued to practice. In fact, it was just a beating. He found that this Arya's physical body was even more terrifying than his dimensional physical body. When he slashed her head with his sword, there was not even a trace. Not only that, this little girl's combat awareness was also very terrifying. Fighting with this Arya, he had no chance at all. Whether it was in terms of physical strength or consciousness, he was crushed. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. On this day, the man in green appeared in front of Yi Xian and Arya. At this moment, Yi Xian was lying on the ground, motionless. The man in green leaned over to look at Yi Xian, and said with a smile, "What enlightenment do you have?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "I can't beat him." The man in green nodded, "It's normal that you can't beat him. Apart from that, do you have any other enlightenment?" Yi Xian shook his head, "No." The man in green was a little helpless. "Didn't you notice a problem? One's strength can beat 10. Yi Xian looked at the man in green, and the man in green smiled. "If your strength is strong enough, any time and space can be broken. Of course, you have to be strong enough, otherwise, you will be limited by space and time. So, what you have to do is to make your strength change qualitatively." Yi Xian was a little confused. Qualitatively change? The man in green turned to look at Arya. "Arya, punch him." Arya punched at Yi Xian's head. Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. Damn, if she punched him, wouldn't his head burst? Just when Arya's fist was a dozen inches away from Yi Xian's head, a sword blocked Arya's fist. The man in green's sword. The man in green glanced at Arya. "I asked you to punch the air, why did you hit his head?" Arya curled her lips. "You didn't say it clearly." As she spoke, she turned around and punched. Boom! The space in front of Arya suddenly shattered and then annihilated. True annihilation. Even the time dimension had disappeared. This punch forcibly erased everything. It had to be said that Yi Xian was still a little shocked, and also a little scared. This little girl did not use her full strength when fighting with him just now. If not, his dimensional body would have been smashed into nothingness by this punch. The man in green smiled. "Do you understand?" Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." As he spoke, he looked at the man in green. "How can I have this kind of strength?" The man in green smiled. "Practice." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Practice slowly." The man in green said, "Your biggest weakness is that you have never broken through your limits." What is a limit? For example, your sword drawing technique. As he spoke, he shook his head and sighed. "Son, I don't want to say anything, but your father's invincible sword technique is like dog sh*t by you. It's really embarrassing. I'm embarrassed to say that I created the sword drawing technique." Yi Xian was speechless. The man in green said again, "Now, you will start practicing the sword drawing technique. Come, I will show you what the sword drawing technique is." As his voice fell, he suddenly drew his sword. Buzz! A sword sound suddenly resounded, and in an instant, the whole world was directly shattered, and it began to be annihilated bit by bit. Seeing this scene, the man in green's expression froze, and he smiled awkwardly. "I used a little too much strength." Yi Xian was speechless. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in the field. When he saw the world in the field being annihilated bit by bit, the old man's expression suddenly became extremely ugly. The old man looked at the man in green, and the man in green looked at Yi Xian, and said seriously, "I told you to be careful, but you just had to use so much strength. Now, this world is gone because of you. Are you going to pay for it?" Yi Xian was dumbfounded. "Damn, you." The man in green glared at Yi Xian. "You what? Hurry up and apologize to her." Yi Xian was speechless. Arya and Xiaobai also looked at the man in green in shock, and the two little fellows' eyes were wide open. At this moment, the man in green turned to look at the old man, and said with a smile, "My son is young and insensible, and he has caused you trouble." The old man glanced at Yi Xian, who was next to him, and said, "Your son's strength is not simple. He actually destroyed this world with one sword strike." As he spoke, he looked at the man in green. "Sir, no matter what, the origin of this world has been destroyed by your son, and this compensation," the man in green nodded, "it should be compensated." Hearing this, the old man's expression relaxed a little. He was afraid that he would encounter unreasonable people. At this moment, the man in green looked at Yi Xian. "Compensate." Yi Xian blinked. "Me?" The man in green said seriously, "You destroyed it, so you naturally have to compensate." Yi Xian's face darkened. Can I scold people? The man in green chuckled. Can I hit people? Yi Xian, at the side, Arya shook her head. Xiao Xuanzi is so pitiful. He can't beat him in a fight, and he can't beat him in an argument. It's so tragic. Xiao Bai nodded vigorously. P.S. Recently, there have been too many things to do in the real world, and I've been too busy, so I haven't updated much. Please forgive me. Chapter 1656. Yi Xian felt rather aggrieved. Damn it. How can my father be so shameless? He is forcing me to be the scapegoat. The elder looked at Yi Xian and his son and was about to speak. At this moment, a voice suddenly echoed. This is a small matter. What is there to compensate for? The elder turned around and saw a middle-aged man walking over slowly with a face full of smiles. The elder was slightly stunned when he saw the middle-aged man and quickly bowed. Greetings to Building Lord Jiang. Building Lord Jiang. This was the owner of the 99th floor. Building Lord Jiang nodded slightly and walked to Yi Xian. He cupped his fist and said, Sect Master Yang, I am Jiang Billy from the 99th floor. As he spoke, he looked around and laughed. The destruction of this world is just a small matter. There is no need to compensate. The green-robed man laughed. That won't do. As he spoke, he looked at Little White. Little White understood and waved its little claw. A pile of purple aura appeared in front of Jiang Billy. Jiang Billy's eyes flashed with a trace of shock when he saw the purple aura. He wanted to say something, but the green-robed man laughed and said, Do as you should. Keep it. Jiang Billy hesitated for a moment and nodded. All right. As he spoke, he kept the purple aura and sighed in his heart. This person doesn't want to owe me a favor. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and laughed. The Dao discussion conference is about to begin. Let's go. Yi Xian nodded. All right. After Yi Xian and the others left, Jiang Billy spoke softly. I never expected that there would be such an expert in this world. The elder at the side had some doubts. Building Lord, who is this person? Jiang Billy laughed. Don't stay in the building all day. Go out and take a stroll when you have nothing to do. Who in the entire boundless continent didn't know this green-robed man? He killed half-step intent realm experts like killing dogs. Everyone was guessing that this green-robed man had reached the true intent realm expert. It wasn't impossible. This green-robed man had a spirit ancestor by his side. It was rumored that the spirit ancestor could help people break through their limits. Jiang Billy looked into the distance with a calm expression. It was unknown what he was thinking. After a long time, Jiang Billy shook his head and sighed. Such a character isn't someone I can go against. With that, he turned around and left. He had also had ideas about the spirit ancestor, but in the end, he chose to give up. Sometimes, a single thought could bring about hell. On the street, Yi Xian suddenly asked, What is this Dao discussion conference? The azure-robed man smiled and said, It's just a gathering of some experts to discuss the Dao. It will be of great help to you right now. Yi Xian was puzzled. Dad, you're better than them. Isn't it better for you to teach me? The green-clothed man thought for a moment and said, Shit. Yi Xian frowned. Why? The green-robed man was somewhat helpless. You're too weak. I don't know where to start teaching you. Yi Xian's face immediately darkened. At this moment, Ming appeared beside Yi Xian. She glanced at Yi Xian. I'll go with you. Yi Xian nodded. All right. In a short while, the group arrived in front of a stone hall. The stone hall was supported by 18 giant rocks. Each of the giant rocks was so big that it required at least a dozen people to encircle it. It looked extremely magnificent. Boundless City's city lord, Hua Yi, was already waiting here. When she saw Yi Xian and the group, she immediately welcomed them with a smile. Sect Lord Yang, please. The green-robed man nodded. Thank you, City Lord Hua. Hua Yi smiled and said, You're welcome. The group entered the stone hall. The space inside the stone hall was very spacious. It was at least 3 kilometers in length and width. There were some people in the stone hall, but there were only 6 or 7 of them. However, these 6 or 7 people's auras were like the vast starry sky and were unfathomable. When Yi Xian and the others entered, the 7 of them all turned their heads to look. Their gazes were all on the man in green. The green-robed man looked around. At this moment, Hua Yi smiled and said, Senior, sit at the front. As she spoke, she led Yi Xian and the others towards the front. Hua Yi had chosen the first row for Yi Xian and the others. When they saw Yi Xian and the others sitting in the first row, a trace of surprise flashed through the eyes of the 7 people in the stone hall. The first row wasn't a place that just anyone could sit in. Those who could sit in the first row were people of status and strength. Who was this green-robed man? Hua Yi glanced at the green-robed man and said softly, Sect Lord Yang, according to the rules, everyone who enters has to go up and talk about their experiences in the martial Dao. You. The green-robed man was slightly helpless. I might not have anything to say. Hua Yi smiled and said, Just say a few words. The green-robed man thought for a moment and nodded. All right. Hua Yi's smile grew brighter when she heard this, and she was filled with anticipation. The martial Dao experiences of an expert of this level were absolutely extremely precious. They might even be able to help her improve further. More and more people entered the stone hall. Moreover, Yi Xian noticed that the weakest amongst them was a half-step intent realm expert. However, there weren't any intent realm experts. An hour later, there were 48 people within the hall. Meanwhile, the stone door to the hall suddenly closed. A gray-robed old man suddenly appeared on the stone platform before Yi Xian and the others. The gray-robed old man glanced at them before he withdrew an ancient book and opened it. After that, he said in a hoarse voice, The utilization of space. The old man's experiences in the martial Dao were related to the utilization of space. Needless to say, Yi Xian was quite shocked. Because he noticed that his understanding of the spatial Dao was too shallow. There were too many uses for space. For example, the spatial condensation technique that the old man spoke of. It was the ability to condense space. If it was accomplished to the extreme, then one could condense an entire world space within the palm of one's hand with a single thought. Not to mention Yi Xian, even Ah Ming was slightly shocked. In theory, it wasn't impossible. However, it was extremely difficult to accomplish. It was difficult to the point that even she couldn't accomplish it. Right at this moment, the gray-robed old man suddenly said, Space can be condensed or overlapped. Moreover, multiple worlds can be connected and overlapped to attain the legendary spatial overlap. When he spoke up to this point, he stopped, closed the ancient book in his hand, and then moved to the side. Yi Xian was stunned. He'd been listening with great interest. Why did this old man stop? Meanwhile, Hua Yi smiled and said, They always hold back. If young master is interested, then you can look for him in private and exchange your experiences in the martial Dao with him. Yi Xian came to an understanding when he heard this. It wasn't free. It had to be exchanged. Meanwhile, a black-robed man walked onto the platform. He glanced at everyone before he opened his palm, and then a ball of flames suddenly arose from his palm. Bang! In an instant, the temperature in the hall rose explosively. In practically an instant, everyone felt as if they'd been placed within a furnace, and it seemed like they were on the verge of being evaporated. Yi Xian was slightly shocked. He gazed at the ball of flames in the black-robed man's hand. The flame was ghastly white, seemed as if it was condensed from bones, and it emanated a ghastly aura. Death fire. Meanwhile, Hua Yi suddenly explained, This flame is condensed from one's own death energy. Yi Xian was slightly curious. One's own death energy? Hua Yi nodded. A person that's about to die will produce death energy within their body, and the stronger a person is, the stronger the death energy produced would be. He should have almost died in the past, but he used some unknown method to actually condense the death energy within his body into this death fire. Simply speaking, he's telling us that he has a method to bring the dead back to life. Of course, it's impossible to truly bring the dead back to life. However, he should be able to forcefully extend one's life by using this method. This method is extraordinarily precious to those whose lifespans are almost up. As expected, Yi Xian noticed that the aura in the surroundings had suddenly fluctuated greatly. Obviously, someone was tempted. The middle-aged man didn't say anything, and he directly retreated after he displayed the flame. But it wasn't long before someone stood up and walked towards the middle-aged man. It wasn't just one person, but several people. Yi Xian was a little curious. Senior, logically speaking, they've already reached half-step intent realm, so their lifespans should be very long. Why do they care so much about their lifespans? Hua Yi shook her head and smiled. Young Master Yi, there's something you don't know. These people have all lived for at least 100,000 years, and the lifespan of a half-step intent realm powerhouse is at most 120,000 years. In other words, if they can't advance further, they basically don't have much longer to live, unless they have some special secret method or treasures of heaven and earth to forcefully extend their lives. However, this kind of method is extremely rare. As she spoke, she paused, then continued, in fact, there's another way, and that is to reincarnate with their memories and live another life. However, at this point, she glanced at Ah Ming. Back then, God Yi set some rules. For powerhouses like them to reincarnate with their memories, they must break the rules set by God Yi back then. Although God Yi has fallen, so far, no one has been able to break the rules. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Rules? Hua Yi smiled. Under normal circumstances, you won't be able to sense it. However, if you reincarnate with your memories, you must enter the reincarnation passage. Within that reincarnation passage, there's a restriction left by God Yi. As she spoke, she shook her head and smiled. Forget about half-step intent realm powerhouses, even intent realm powerhouses will find it difficult to break that restriction. That's because God Yi's strength back then should have far surpassed intent realm powerhouses. Yi Xian turned to look at Ah Ming, who nodded. Master's strength is indeed far beyond intent realm. Hua Yi continued, back then, God Yi actually gathered all the powerhouses to resist the alien dimensional clan. However, no one went to help. That's because his so-called order and rules cut off many people's path of survival. He wanted to make this universe better, and to make this universe better, those top powerhouses are the biggest obstacle. Because powerhouses are willful, how could they be willing to give up everything and be controlled by those so-called rules? Ah Ming said coldly, if the alien dimensional clan comes, everyone will die. Hua Yi smiled. Miss, you're wrong. The alien dimensional clan coming over won't affect us. First of all, they have no reason to target us. What's in it for them? There's no benefit at all. Moreover, even if they target us, we still have the ability to protect ourselves. Ah Ming did not say anything else. Her master was already hostile to the people here, so how could she ask the people here to fight against the alien dimensional clan? Moreover, there was no chance of winning. With a disaster coming, everyone had to submit to their own fate. Chapter 1657. The middle-aged man's ability to revive the dead had clearly drawn the attention of everyone, and over a dozen people had gone to look for him in succession. However, all of them returned with slight disappointment. Obviously, they were disappointed because the middle-aged man hadn't taken a fancy to their comprehensions of the Grand Tao. Meanwhile, a woman walked up onto the stone platform. She wore a snow-white dress, had long hair that hung loosely on her shoulders, and had exquisite features. She seemed like a breathtaking celestial maiden. The woman didn't waste her breath at all. She opened her palm, and there was a tiny ball in her palm. The ball was crystal blue. Everyone here was visibly moved when they saw it. Even a trace of surprise flashed through Hua Yi's eyes. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. What's that? Hua Yi gazed at Yi Xian, smiled, and explained, stars. Yi Xian asked humbly. Stars? Hua Yi nodded. Don't underestimate this ball. It contains boundless energy of the stars. She thought for a moment as she spoke, and then she said, so, if this woman were to utilize this ball, then the energy of the stars within it would be sufficient to destroy an entire universe with ease. Even a half-step intent realm expert would probably perish on the spot if they didn't possess some sort of unique ability. It can be said that this ability of hers is sufficient to crush most people here. Yi Xian spoke softly, she's here to show off her muscles. Hua Yi smiled, yes. Of course, it's also possible that she's looking for like-minded people to exchange the energy of the stars with. Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at the green-clothed man. Father, do you think this ability of hers is formidable? Hua Yi and the others gazed at the green-clothed man as well. The green-clothed man glanced at Yi Xian. Do you think it's formidable? Yi Xian nodded. I think it's quite formidable. The green-clothed man nodded slightly, and then he closed his eyes slowly and fell silent. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said, Father, what's the meaning of this? The green-clothed man was slightly helpless. We're not on the same level, so we can't talk. Yi Xian was speechless. Pfft. At the side, Hua Yi couldn't help but laugh, but she quickly returned to normal. Ming also shook his head and smiled. During this period of time, his master had been dealt a blow every day. The key was that he had no way of refuting it. It was a little miserable. At this time, the woman on the stage had already walked down. Yi Xian noticed that an old man was walking towards the woman. Obviously, this old man was also proficient in the power of the stars. But at this moment, the woman ignored the old man and walked straight to Yi Xian and the others. She glanced at Xiao Bai, who was quietly licking the candied haws with Arya, then looked at the green-robed man and smiled. Sect Master Yang, is my method acceptable to you? The azure-robed man smiled and said, not bad. The woman smiled and said, I wonder if I can exchange some violet chi with Sect Master Yang? Obviously, he wanted the purple aura. The green-robed man thought for a moment before turning to look at Yi Xian. Do you want to learn that move? Yi Xian shook his head. He didn't have much interest in the power of the stars. At this moment, the woman suddenly looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young master, I've noticed that your body seems to be very unusual. Yi Xian nodded. I'm a physique cultivator. The green-robed man suddenly said, you're a swordsman. Yi Xian glanced at the green-robed man and nodded. I'm also a physique cultivator. The green-robed man said again, you're a swordsman. Yi Xian was speechless. I think the body is quite important. The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian. Can you block a strike of my sword? Yi Xian's expression froze, and he shook his head. Green City, Yi Clan, Ancestral Temple. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent and no virtue. From this moment onward, Yi Xian's position as heir is removed and Yi Lang will succeed him. The one who spoke was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this moment, a timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral temple. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a hint of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yiling bowed to the people in the ancestral temple, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is an heir, why did you remove him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yiling coldly, this is a matter of the clan, what are you interrupting for? Leave. Yiling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder directly. However, she did not leave, and instead mustered up her courage to enter the ancestral temple. She bowed to the elders on both sides, Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove him from his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged, whether he is removed or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new heir, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed, you should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yiling clenched her fists, and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new heir, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young Master Yi Lang inherits the position of heir. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled, what's your name? The guard hurriedly bowed, subordinate Zhang Mu greets the heir. Yi Lang nodded, you're not bad. After I become the heir, I need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on. Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply, this subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the heir. Yi Lang nodded slightly, drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back, understand? Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The Great Elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there, and charged towards Zhang Mu once more. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out, brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage, and in the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Peng! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides, there were the Yi clan elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that Yi Xian was to be replaced, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince, why did you discard him for no reason? The Great Elder looked at Yi Ling coldly, this is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the Great Elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides. Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and we don't know if he's dead or alive. Yet, the clan is using a groundless excuse to discard his position. This is unfair. Impudent. The Great Elder suddenly raged, whether he discards his position or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed, you should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The Great Elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now, he is fighting for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that his chance to shine had come. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the prince's position, and it's everyone's wish. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry, and only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled, what's your name? Chapter 1658. Looking at the green shirt man's painful expression, Yi Xian almost couldn't help but want to beat him up. He really couldn't stand it. However, his rationality told him that he couldn't beat him. Endure. I must endure. Yi Xian took a deep breath, then leaned on the chair and stopped talking. He suddenly regretted coming to this old man. God. God. Watching this guy acting tough, yet he couldn't refute him. This was too frustrating. Too frustrating. He wanted to leave with Ah Ming. At this moment, the swordsman suddenly walked in front of everyone. The swordsman looked at the green shirt man and smiled, brother, was my sword technique not strong? The green shirt man was slightly startled, then he smiled, it's all right. The swordsman's smile suddenly became a little playful, it's all right? The green shirt man smiled, it's all right. The swordsman shook his head and smiled, my unparalleled sword technique is only all right in your eyes. Interesting. Really interesting. The green shirt man smiled, what's the matter? The swordsman stared at the green shirt man, I see that you are also a swordsman. Why don't you come on stage and show your skills? The green shirt man thought about it and said, I only know how to kill. Yi Xian, the swordsman was stunned, then he laughed, your words sound like I don't know how to kill. The green shirt man smiled, are you looking for trouble? The swordsman smiled, no. It's just that I don't like you. Yi Xian, on the side, area looked at the swordsman with some pity. There were many people who didn't like Brother Yang, but the weeds on those people's graves were already 3 feet tall. Xiao Bai continued to lick the candied fruit, not caring about anything. The green shirt man turned to look at Yi Xian and smiled, someone doesn't like your father. Don't you want to say something? Yi Xian said lightly, can I say that I don't like you too? The blue-clothed man shook his head. You unfilial son. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, the swordsman suddenly laughed and said, since your excellency is also a swordsman, why don't we exchange a few moves? 2 moves. As soon as these words were spoken, the gazes of countless people shot over. A fight between swordsmen? That would be very interesting. Especially this powerful swordsman. The green-robed man shook his head. Seeing the green-robed man shake his head, the swordsman narrowed his eyes. You refuse? The azure-robed man smiled and said, no, what I mean is, there's no need for 2 moves, 1 is enough. All the spectators were stunned when they heard this. The swordsman was stunned for a moment, and then he burst out laughing. 1 move is enough? I, Nan Feng, have never seen such an arrogant person since I started cultivating the sword. What a joke, ah. The azure-robed man was about to stand up when Yi Xian suddenly chuckled. What would you do if my father subdues you with a single move? Nan Feng gazed at Yi Xian, little fellow, do you think that's possible? Is it? Yi Xian grinned, why don't we make a bet? Nan Feng grinned, what kind of bet? Yi Xian spoke seriously, if my father subdues you with a single move, then you'll follow me for 3 years. If he can't, then he'll follow you for 3 years. The azure-robed man couldn't help but say, why do I have to follow him for 3 years and not you? Yi Xian spoke seriously, you're the one fighting him, not me. The azure-robed man was about to speak when the swordsman suddenly said, I agree. He agreed. The swordsman gazed at the azure-robed man, draw your sword. I'd like to see how you're going to subdue me with a single move. The azure-robed man glanced at Yi Xian with an enigmatic smile. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke calmly, Qing has never used 2 moves against anyone. Big brother Xiao Yao has never used 2 moves against his enemies. When he spoke up to this point, he looked at the azure-robed man and feigned exaggeration, Father, don't tell me you're going to use 2 moves. It can't be, right? The azure-robed man gave a thumbs up to Yi Xian, you're amazing. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at the swordsman. The swordsman smiled, shall we go somewhere else? The azure-robed man smiled, no need. As he spoke, he suddenly drew his sword. The swordsman's expression changed drastically at the instant the azure-robed man drew his sword. However, he reacted swiftly, and a sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Just as he was about to draw his sword, a sword was already pressed against his forehead. He lost. The surroundings suddenly fell silent to the point a pin drop could be heard. A single strike. Many people in the surroundings had seen the azure-robed man attack. The azure-robed man's attack was very slow, but they couldn't figure out how the swordsman had lost. Even the swordsman himself was slightly dazed. How did I lose? The swordsman's attack was clearly very slow. Hua Yi took a deep and long glance at the azure-robed man. The azure-robed man wasn't slow, he was too fast. She'd never seen such speed. Is this the speed of a human? Ah Ming's expression was extremely solemn because the azure-robed man's sword was truly too fast. It had surpassed the dimension of time. It had far surpassed it. The azure-robed man sheathed his sword and smiled, you've lost. As he spoke, he sat down and glanced at Yi Xian, just you wait. Yi Xian was quite speechless. Damn it. This father of mine actually holds a grudge. I have to be careful now because this fellow might try to trick me. Meanwhile, the swordsman, Nan Feng, spoke abruptly, "Why is your sword so fast?" The azure-robed man replied indifferently, "I don't like the look of you either." I refused to answer. Nan Feng was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up. "Sir, do you remember our bet from before?" Nan Feng glanced at Yi Xian. "I remember." Yi Xian said seriously, "Are you willing to accept your loss?" Nan Feng fell silent. Yi Xian smiled. "I know why my father's sword is so fast." Nan Feng glanced at Yi Xian. "I'll follow you for 3 years." Yi Xian smiled faintly. "How awesome. I have another super fighter." Although Nan Feng isn't my father's match, how many people in this world can be my father's match? This is a half-step intent realm expert. Moreover, he's a swordsman. His combat strength is absolutely top-notch. Nan Feng glanced at the azure-robed man and hesitated to speak. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. "Sir, if there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me. I know everything." Nan Feng glanced at Yi Xian suspiciously. "Young friend, are you sure you know everything?" Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, "My father knows everything. If my father knows, then I know. What's wrong with that?" Nan Feng was speechless. Hua Yi and Ah Ming also looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. How could he do that? Arya glanced at Yi Xian and gave him a thumbs up. Awesome. Each is more shameless than the other. The azure-robed man was also speechless. Damn it. Why is my son so thick-skinned? At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared on the stone platform. The old man held a black cane in his hand. His hair and beard were all white, and he looked extremely old. At this moment, Hua Yi suddenly said, "Old Song." Yi Xian looked at Hua Yi, and the latter explained, "Old Song is the organizer of this Dao discussion meeting. He's very famous in our circle, and everyone will give him face. Even my endless city has to give him some face too. Moreover, he's rather mysterious, and there seems to be a mysterious force behind him." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Endless city shouldn't be as simple as it seems on the surface, right?" Hua Yi shook her head and smiled. "Before young master and senior, my endless city is truly insignificant." Actually, these words weren't modest, but they came from the bottom of her heart. This azure-robed man before her was truly too invincible. Although Endless City had strength, it wasn't enough in front of this azure-robed man at all. Yi Xian was just about to speak when the old man on the platform suddenly looked at the azure-robed man and smiled lightly. "I'm fortunate to meet Sect Leader Yang today. I wonder if Sect Leader Yang can give me some guidance." "Give me some guidance." As soon as these words came out, everyone present looked at the azure-robed man. Guidance? This was an old man. He was actually so respectful to this azure-robed man. Who was this man? At the side, Hua Yi also looked at the azure-robed man. She was also looking forward to it. The martial Dao experience of a powerhouse of this level would definitely be of great help to them, and it might even allow her to improve further. The azure-robed man was slightly speechless. His experience was useless to these people before him. Because he didn't cultivate. But these people before him all cultivated. They weren't in the same circle at all. Everyone present was looking at the azure-robed man. At this moment, the azure-robed man suddenly smiled and said, "Why don't you let my son say a few words?" Yi Xian's expression froze when he heard that. Motherf asterisk cur. This fellow is starting to screw his son over. The azure-robed man pointed at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "My son is also a swordsman. Although his cultivation realm is on the low side, he's very outstanding. In this world, there's basically no one besides me that can surpass his attainments in the sword Dao. Come, let's welcome my son to speak on the platform." As he spoke, he started clapping. Yi Xian's face darkened. Damn it. 10,000 horses galloped through his heart. Some people gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of curiosity in their eyes. Is this young man that formidable? Meanwhile, the azure-robed man glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Son, go up there and say a few words. Yi Xian's face was extremely dark. Damn it. What am I supposed to say if I go up there? Act cool in front of these people? Is that even possible? It's obviously impossible. He's asking me to go up there and embarrass myself. The azure-robed man blinked. Everyone's waiting for you. Meanwhile, the old man spoke as well. Young friend, just say a few words. Yi Xian turned around to look at Ah Ming. Ah Ming was slightly helpless, and he spoke via voice transmission. I can't help you as well. How? It's not good for outsiders like us to interfere in the matters between you and your son. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and walked towards the stone platform. Everyone present was looking at Yi Xian. It didn't take long for Yi Xian to arrive on the stone platform, and he glanced at everyone present. The weakest amongst them was at the half-step intent realm. It could be said that he was the weakest amongst them. Yi Xian gazed at the azure-robed man, and the azure-robed man smiled complacently. Chapter 1659. In the stone hall, everyone was looking at Yi Xian on the stone platform. Actually, they were very curious about what Yi Xian would say. The green-clothed man was very strong. However, Yi Xian's cultivation was truly too low. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly smiled and said, Seniors, do all of you know what cultivation realm my father is at? Many people within the stone hall instantly gazed at the green-clothed man. What cultivation realm is he at? All of them were quite curious. Actually, everyone within the stone hall was already guessing. Since he was able to easily subdue a half-step intent swordsman, then he might have attained true intent. Moreover, there weren't many true intents throughout the history of this universe. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly spoke with a serious expression. You're right, my father has attained intent. The atmosphere in the surroundings instantly became tense when they heard this. Intent. He really is an expert with intent. As soon as Yi Xian spoke these words, the gazes of many changed as they gazed at the green-clothed man. Respect. The difference between an expert with intent and a half-step intent realm expert was like the difference between the heavens and the earth. Meanwhile, Yi Xian continued, Seniors, I'm sure all of you are curious about how my father attained intent, right? All of them gazed at Yi Xian. Curious. Of course they were. Meanwhile, the old man suddenly walked over to Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young friend, would be eternally grateful if you're able to divulge some information to me. Many others bowed successively as well. Everyone within the stone hall was at the half-step intent realm, so what was their goal? Naturally, it was to improve further, intent. Yi Xian gazed at them, and he was in a slightly difficult position. This. The old man bowed once more. Young friend, please provide us with guidance. The others bowed successively as well. Intent. One's consciousness would never be extinguished. Who didn't want to attain it? Moreover, once one attained intent, one's lifespan would be greatly increased. After all, even though all of them were top-rate experts of this world, they didn't have much lifespan left. They'd lived for too long. Yi Xian sighed softly, and he was still in a slightly difficult position. The old man intended to say something, but it didn't take long for him to think of something. He withdrew a thick ancient book and passed it to Yi Xian. Young friend, this is the old man's lifetime attainments. Please accept it. Yi Xian blinked. This. The old man said, Yi Xian, this. Yi Xian put it away without batting an eyelid. Then, he said, Old song, shall we talk somewhere else? The old man's eyes flashed. All right. The old man was about to leave with Yi Xian. Meanwhile, countless strands of divine sense had locked onto the old man. The old man frowned slightly. A man in black suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the old man. He cupped his fists at Yi Xian. Young friend, I also have some insights. Soon, everyone in the stone hall surrounded Yi Xian. Some gave him their insights, some gave him their ultimate skills, and some gave him equipment. For a moment, Yi Xian became the focus of the entire stone hall. Below, the green-robed man was somewhat speechless. Damn it, how could this guy be so good at fooling people? At the side, Arya looked at Yi Xian, who was constantly receiving gifts on the stage, and said seriously, "Little Xuanzi is amazing." Whitey nodded vigorously. Arya continued, "He's with us. I'll bring him along to play in the future." Xiao Bai nodded in agreement. After a while, Yi Xian accepted everyone's gifts. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian, waiting for Yi Xian's guidance. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Seniors, please return to your seats." The experts hesitated for a moment before returning to their seats. Yi Xian said seriously, "Seniors, there are two ways to reach the intent realm. The first is the origin of the great Tao that everyone knows. However, as you all know, the origin of the great Tao no longer exists in this world. Even in the alternate dimension, reaching the origin of the great Tao is extremely rare. Therefore, it's not realistic to use the origin of the great Tao to break through the intent realm." After saying that, he paused and said, "The second way is the primordial violet energy." Primordial violet energy. Below, Whitey blinked and looked at Arya. She waved her little paw a few times, but no one knew what she was saying. Arya thought for a moment and said, "He's probably trying to get something without risking anything." Brilliant. Brilliant. Whitey, primordial violet energy. In the hall, many people's gazes fell on Whitey. In an instant, Whitey became the focus of the entire hall. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked over to Whitey, withdrew a spatial ring and candied fruits, and placed them in Whitey's little paw. He smiled and said, "Show them some violet energy." Whitey blinked, and then she calmly put the candied fruits and the spatial ring away. She waved her little paw, and then a strand of violet energy suddenly floated up from the center of her palm. At this moment, everyone looked at that strand of violet energy. Primordial violet energy. When they saw the primordial violet energy, the expressions of everyone here gradually became solemn, and then they became excited and fervent. They hadn't seen the origin of the great Tao, but as far as they were concerned, the primordial violet energy was absolutely not inferior to the origin of the great Tao. With the primordial violet energy, perhaps they might really be able to attain intent realm. Yi Xian smiled and said, "Seniors, you don't lack hard work because you've already arrived at the end of this world. What you lack is fortuitous encounters. I believe that so long as you have sufficient primordial violet energy, then you'll be able to attain intent realm or even above it. So long as you have primordial violet energy, then your future is limitless. Life is limitless as well." Needless to say, Yi Xian's words were very provocative, and the blood of all these old fellows couldn't help but boil. What were they pursuing right now? It was intent. Life was limitless. Of course, it didn't take long for them to calm down. If they wanted to pursue limitless life and attain intent, then they needed primordial violet energy. All of them gazed at Whitey again. Seize it? The first thought in their minds was to seize it, but they quickly rejected this thought. Because of the green-clothed man. He was a true expert with intent. Seize the spirit ancestor from him? Wouldn't that be no different than courting death? Even if all of them joined forces, they would probably be no match for this man. What should we do? In next to no time, some of them gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian laughed bitterly. Everyone, the primordial violet energy is extremely precious. Even for me, my father only gives me 100 strands every year. 100 strands. So, I'm unable to help all of you. The expressions of many within the hall instantly fell when they heard this. He only gives his own son 100 strands? Isn't his father too stingy? As expected, there was no familial love in front of the great Tao. Next to him, the azure-robed man looked at Yi Xian with a playful smile. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw this. However, he quickly calmed down. Damn it. I'm not afraid. Don't be a coward, just do it. Even your own father will do it. In the stone hall, everyone looked at the green-clothed man again. The green-clothed man smiled without saying anything. They did not look for the green-clothed man, nor did they ask him. He only gave his own son 100 strands of primordial violet energy every year. Why would he give it to them for no reason? Exchange? Such an expert would definitely not be interested in their things. For a moment, everyone in the hall revealed bitter expressions. They had just seen hope, but it was going to be extinguished again. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, however, this voice instantly attracted the gazes of all the experts in the stone hall. The old man beside Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Little friend, speak quickly." Yi Xian said seriously, "Everyone, to be honest, I am now the master of the Cosmos Divine Court." The Cosmos Divine Court. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. The Cosmos Divine Court? God Yi. The expressions of everyone here had become strange. God Yi had tricked all of them. So, they didn't have a good impression of the Cosmos Divine Court. However, it was different now. The old man suddenly said, "The Cosmos Divine Court. It's a very good power that maintains the peace of the universe." The old man has always admired it. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. As if I'd believe you. Ah Ming was speechless as well. These old fellows are willing to disregard their dignity for the sake of attaining intent. The others chimed in and praised the Cosmos Divine Court. For a time, the Cosmos Divine Court had become superior. Maintain the peace of the universe. After a round of compliments, all of them gazed at Yi Xian and waited for him to continue. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, "Everyone, to tell you the truth, the Cosmos Divine Court is quite lacking in people right now." Everyone instantly came to an understanding when they heard this. He wanted them to join the Cosmos Divine Court. Many of them were slightly hesitant. Wouldn't joining the Cosmos Divine Court be equivalent to being controlled by others? They were used to being free. They were definitely not used to listening to the orders of others. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly gazed at Nan Feng. "You've been with me for 3 years, right?" Nan Feng glanced at Yi Xian and nodded, "Yes." Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, 3 years. How about this? I'll give you 100 strands of violet energy every month for free. I'll give you a year's worth of violet energy in advance. As he spoke, he gazed at Snowy. Snowy blinked and acted very cooperatively, and then she waved her little claw and a huge amount of violet energy surged towards Nan Feng. Nan Feng was visibly moved, and he hurriedly absorbed the violet energy. As soon as he did, a formidable aura suddenly appeared within him. He'd become stronger. Countless people were visibly moved when they witnessed this scene. The violet energy was really effective. It really was effective. Even Hua Yi's expression changed. She wasn't sure whether or not this grand mist purple energy could help a half-step concept powerhouse reach concept, but she was now certain that this grand mist purple energy was useful to a half-step concept powerhouse. Moreover, it was extremely useful. Right at this moment, Nan Feng suddenly opened his eyes. He glanced at himself, and then ran over to Yi Xian. He gazed at Yi Xian and said seriously, "Young brother, I, Nan Feng, am willing to admit defeat. I'm willing to follow you for 300 years. Not a single day less." Yi Xian was dumbstruck. 300 years? Isn't it 3 years? Nan Feng spoke seriously. How can 3 years be enough? It'll take at least 300 years. Young brother, don't say anything. I, Nan Feng, am a person who can afford to lose. 300 years, not a single day less. Oh, right. The Cosmos Court? To tell you the truth, God Yi is the person I admire the most. I've been wanting to join the Cosmos Court and pay my respects to God Yi all these years. Unfortunately, I never had the chance. It's great that young brother is here today. I, Nan Feng, am willing to join the Cosmos Court and contribute my meager strength to protect the universe. As he spoke, he suddenly took out a sword and pointed it at the sky with an extremely serious expression. I, Nan Feng, swear to the heavens that I will live and die with the Cosmos Court. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. I finally understand something. It wasn't a matter of time, but a matter of updating. If there were too few updates, even if they weren't lousy, everyone would not be satisfied and would feel unhappy. If there were too many updates, even if it were 1 or 2 lousy chapters, everyone would still feel satisfied. At the end of the day, it was a matter of updating. Is there something wrong with my understanding? Chapter 1660. Everyone within the stone hall was stunned. Damn it. Has Nan Feng gone mad? 300 years. He even swore. Swearing wasn't a joke for experts at their level. An oath represented a form of karma. It might be good karma, or it might be bad karma. But this fellow actually swore. There was only one explanation. The primordial violet energy was really useful. It was more useful than they'd imagined, and it could even attain intent. Otherwise, a half-step intent realm expert wouldn't be so shameless. Many people within the stone hall gazed at Yi Xian when they thought up to this point. Obviously, they had to make a decision. Meanwhile, Yi Xian said, "Everyone, the primordial violet energy is truly too precious. Moreover, it's extremely rare. Even the spirit ancestor doesn't have much in a year. So, I'm only recruiting 10 people this time." 10. The old man suddenly grabbed Yi Xian's hand and gazed at Yi Xian. "If you don't mind my age, I'd like to join the Cosmos Court as well and contribute to this universe." Yi Xian smiled. It couldn't be any better to have a senior join the Cosmos Court. As he spoke, he gazed at Little White. Little White blinked, waved its little claw, and a pile of violet energy surged towards the old man. Yi Xian smiled. "Little White, the old man isn't an ordinary person. You have to give him more." Little White nodded and gave more violet energy to the old man. The old man's body instantly trembled when he absorbed the primordial violet energy, and then a strand of muddy energy emanated from his body. It was the energy of death and muddy energy. The expressions of many experts within the stone hall instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. As for Hua Yi, she stood up immediately. The old man was obviously someone who was nearing the end of his lifespan. Because only someone who was about to die would produce the energy of death and muddy energy. At this moment, the energy of death and muddy energy had actually emanated from his body. What did this mean? It meant that the primordial violet energy could eliminate the energy of death and muddy energy. It was equivalent to forcefully extending one's life. It was countless times better than that expert's method of condensing the energy of death. At this moment, everyone within the stone hall was tempted. This included Hua Yi. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly said, "There are only 10 places, 10, old man is willing to join the Cosmos God Court. I am Li Huajiu, half a step into the pinnacle of the intent realm. I am almost invincible in the same realm. I am willing to join the Cosmos God Court, old man Mulin, half-step pinnacle intent realm, unrivaled in the same realm, willing to join the Cosmos God Court." Instantly, everyone present requested to join the Cosmos God Court. Yi Xian looked at everyone and said seriously, "Everyone, I will also speak the truth. My Cosmos God Court's current enemy is the alternate dimension. In other words, joining my Cosmos God Court is equivalent to becoming an enemy of the alternate dimension. Everyone, please consider this carefully. Becoming enemies with a different dimension." Nan Feng suddenly smiled and said, "So be it. Could it be that we're afraid of them?" The old man suddenly laughed and said, "Nan Feng is right. Why would our universe be afraid of them? Weren't they just a bunch of aliens playing with time? Just do it. The others also laughed, expressing that they were not afraid of the alternate dimension. Ah Ming looked at this scene and sighed in her heart. She understood one thing. Back then, why couldn't God Yi gather the experts of this universe? Because God Yi had never considered things from the perspective of these experts. If there were no benefits, why would they help you fight against the alternate dimension? Fighting against the alternate dimension was equivalent to risking their lives. If there were no benefits, they would definitely not be willing to risk their lives. And if there were benefits, just like now, these people would fight to the death against the alternate dimension. Ah Ming sighed again. To make people risk their lives, just talking about righteousness was not enough. They also needed to give benefits. After a while, Yi Xian took everyone into the Cosmos God Court. It could be said that from now on, the Cosmos God Court had truly become the strongest force in this universe. One must know that the Cosmos God Court still had Ah Ming and the other laws of the universe. The strength of Ah Ming and the others was actually above some half-step intent realm experts. That was because their understanding of time was far above ordinary experts. At the side, the green-robed man watched quietly and did not say anything. However, there was a faint smile on his face all along. He did not stop Yi Xian from doing these things. Of course, he would not take the initiative to let Yi Xian do these things. His attitude was very simple. As long as you have the ability, I am willing to be used by you. At this time, Hua Yi suddenly walked in front of Yi Xian. She looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Young Master Yi, can I also join the Cosmos God Court? Yi Xian said with a smile, Miss Hua, are you here alone, or are you representing the Boundless City? Hua Yi looked at Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, do you want me alone or the entire Endless City? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. It depends on you. However, no matter how many people there are, the primordial violet aura is enough. After a moment of silence, Hua Yi smiled. Of course it's the entire Endless City joining. Everyone joining. Yi Xian looked at Hua Yi. Miss Hua, I hope you understand one thing. We are going against the alien races. In the future, I can't guarantee anything. I might even die. Hua Yi smiled. We are all adults. We understand what our choice means. Yi Xian nodded. That's good. Hua Yi continued. Young Master Yi, after this ends, young Master Yi, please follow me to a place. I need to let young Master Yi understand the foundation of my Endless City. Yi Xian looked at Hua Yi. Can Miss Hua be the master of the entire Endless City? Hua Yi smiled. About this, young Master Yi, don't worry. When I came to find you, I have already obtained the consent of some elders of my Endless City. Yi Xian nodded. That's good. Following which, this Dao discussion conference ended. Because everyone only had one goal, and that was the primordial violet aura. Nothing else was important. Only by obtaining more primordial violet aura could they achieve Intent Realm. Although half-step Intent Realm powerhouses had 100 strands of primordial violet aura every month, it was still a little too little for them. They needed more primordial violet aura. And there was only one way to get more primordial violet aura, and that was to find Yi Xian. At this moment, Hua Yi suddenly said, Young Master Yi, come with me? Yi Xian nodded. Okay. Hua Yi turned to look at the green-robed man. The green-robed man smiled. You guys go shopping. There's someone I know. I'll go meet him. With that said, he glanced at Arya and Xiaobai. Are you guys coming with me or? Arya glanced at Yi Xian. We'll go play with little Xuanzi. The green-robed man smiled. Don't get into trouble. Arya was a little dissatisfied. Brother Yang, when have you ever seen Xiaobai and I provoke trouble? It's always others who provoke us first, so we fight back passively. In the Milky Way realm, our behavior is considered self-defense. This is protected by the law. Xiaobai nodded fiercely. The green-robed man's face was full of black lines. This isn't the Milky Way realm. The law there doesn't apply here. Arya blinked. What if others bully us? The green-robed man glared at Arya. Bully my ass. You better behave yourself. With that said, he glanced at Yi Xian. Keep an eye on them. Don't let them get into trouble. And don't let others bully them. With that said, he turned around and disappeared. Yi Xian looked at Arya. Arya licked her sugar-coated paws, looking very obedient. In fact, from the appearance, Arya and Xiaobai were really harmless. But Yi Xian knew that these two were simply bandits. Don't provoke them. Otherwise, I'll rip off your underwear. In fact, he was particularly curious about the storage ring on Xiaobai's hand. This little guy's storage ring definitely contained many very, very awesome treasures. At this moment, Hua Yi suddenly said, "Young Master Yi, let's go." Yi Xian nodded. Under Hua Yi's lead, Yi Xian and the others walked out of the stone temple. On the way, Yi Xian glanced at Hua Yi. "Miss Hua, what kind of force is this endless city?" Hua Yi smiled and said, "A force that stands aloof from worldly affairs." Yi Xian asked, "Stands aloof from worldly affairs?" Hua Yi nodded. Actually, the people here are basically aloof from worldly affairs. Because the people here only have one goal, and that is to achieve the state of mind and achieve the legendary immortality. Apart from that, everything else doesn't mean much to us. Yi Xian smiled and said, "I feel that the meaning of life is not just cultivation and seeking Tao." Hua Yi smiled slightly. That's because young Master Yi is still young. When you live for tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, you will change your way of thinking. Yi Xian nodded. Perhaps. Before long, Hua Yi brought Yi Xian and the rest to the front of a grand hall. She waved her lily-white hand lightly, and the grand hall's door directly opened. After entering the grand hall, Yi Xian discovered that there were 26 people standing in the grand hall. There were men and women, and all of them were half-step concept powerhouses. Hua Yi glanced at everyone. "Greetings, young Master Yi." Inside the hall, everyone bowed slightly. "Greetings, young Master Yi." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Everyone, no need to be overly courteous." Hua Yi looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Young Master Yi, there are a total of 36 half-step concept powerhouses in my endless city. Including me here, there are 27 people. There are still 9 people in closed seclusion." Yi Xian nodded. "Since Miss Hua brought me here, you should have something to say, right?" Hua Yi nodded. She looked at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, my endless city is willing to follow young Master Yi to fight against the alternate dimension, even if we have to pay with our lives. We only have one request, and that is young Master Yi can provide us with grand mist purple gas so that we can reach concept." Yi Xian didn't say anything. He knew what Hua Yi meant. She wanted him to help them reach concept first. Hua Yi said with a smile, "I've estimated that there are 100 strands of grand mist purple gas every month. At this rate, we will need at least 100 years to have enough grand mist purple gas to break through to concept. 100 years is really too long." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Hua, I understand you. But forgive me for speaking bluntly. After you reach concept, will you really listen to my orders?" Just as Hua Yi was about to speak, Yi Xian said, "Miss Hua, you said that you will help me fight against the alternate dimension because you need the grand mist purple aura. What if you don't need it? Will you still help me fight against the other dimension? Don't make any promises. As you said, at your level, apart from advancing further, everything else is meaningless, isn't it?" Hua Yi was silent. Yi Xian said with a smile, "Miss Hua, forgive me for being blunt, but the first thing you should think about is not what you want from me, but what you can give me. After that, he looked at Arya, Little White, and Ah Ming. Let's go. At this moment, an old man suddenly stood in front of them. The Arcane Swordsman. Chapter 1661. Arya blinked her eyes when she saw the old man blocking in front of her. No one knew what he was up to. She couldn't take the initiative to bully others. But she couldn't let others bully her either. Yi Xian smiled and turned to look at Hua Yi. Miss Hua, are you going to keep us here? Hua Yi suddenly walked in front of the old man. Just as the old man was about to speak, Hua Yi suddenly punched his abdomen. Boom! The old man's physical body directly collapsed and his soul floated out. One punch destroyed the physical body. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the experts in the hall changed. As for the old man whose physical body was destroyed, his face was filled with disbelief. Hua Yi looked at the old man. Did I ask you to stop, young Master Yi? Keep Yi Xian here? She naturally didn't have the guts. At the beginning, she indeed had the idea of attacking the spirit ancestor. But after seeing the strength of the green-robed man, she decisively dispelled this idea. All the half-step intent realm experts in the hall added together wouldn't be a match for the green-robed man. Now, she had the idea of attacking the spirit ancestor. How retarded would she have to be to do that? Hua Yi turned to look at Yi Xian and bowed slightly. Young Master Yi, I'm sorry. Yi Xian smiled. Miss Hua, I feel that you don't really control Endless City. Hua Yi's expression was a little gloomy. Young Master Yi, don't worry. This kind of situation won't happen again. Yi Xian looked at Hua Yi. There won't be a future. Miss Hua, I don't need Endless City to join the Cosmos Divine Court. After saying that, he turned and left. Hua Yi was stunned and was about to speak. At this moment, Arya suddenly turned and looked at Hua Yi. Don't come over, or I'll beat you to death. Hua Yi, soon, Yi Xian and the others disappeared into the distance. In the stone hall, Hua Yi's expression was extremely ugly. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly said, City Lord, this. Hua Yi slowly closed her eyes. I underestimated him. I thought he was just a simple-minded second generation. It's my fault for underestimating him. She brought Yi Xian here. The goal was actually to let Yi Xian see Endless City's strength, then negotiate with Yi Xian, in order to obtain even more benefits. However, she hadn't expected that Yi Xian wouldn't fall for it at all. Rob? Endless City definitely wouldn't dare. With that green-robed man around, stealing the Spirit Patriarch's life would be equivalent to dying early. There was only one way to obtain the primordial violet chi, and that was to look for Yi Xian. Finding the azure-clothed man would not do at all. Because the azure-clothed man's rank was too high. Even if the Endless City packaged up and gave it to him, he would not even take a fancy to it. They could only look for Yi Xian. But now, following Yi Xian's rejection of Endless City's joining, Endless City became even more passive now. A moment later, Hua Yi suddenly said, Get someone to help me investigate this young Master Yi. I want to know everything about him. Yes. An expert quietly disappeared from the hall. Hua Yi looked into the distance, not knowing what she was thinking. On the street, Yi Xian's group was walking slowly. Ah Ming glanced at Yi Xian. Are you really willing to sacrifice so many half-step intent realm experts? Yi Xian smiled. What do you think? Ah Ming said solemnly, with their help, we will be much better off. Yi Xian said softly, Ah Ming, if all the half-step intent realm experts in this cosmos follow us, will we be able to fight against the alternate dimension? Ah Ming was silent for a moment, then said, Probably not. Yi Xian looked at Ah Ming. Probably. Ah Ming nodded. The alternate dimension definitely has intent realm experts, and there might even be experts above them. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. In other words, even if we gather all the peak experts in the cosmos, we still won't be a match for the alternate dimension, right? Ah Ming said, "You're wrong." Yi Xian looked at Ah Ming, who had a calm expression. "Have you forgotten about your father and your sister? And your big brother?" Yi Xian was speechless. Ah Ming continued, "Your father is taking you with him because he wants to help you. However, how much you can get from him will depend on yourself." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." Ah Ming continued, "We must fight for the people here if we can. Even if they are placed in the alternate dimension, they are considered above average. Although they don't have much of an advantage against the otherworldly dimension at present, once we have experts with domains and above, we can stall the top-notch experts of the otherworldly dimension. At that time, they will be very useful." Yi Xian nodded. "Indeed." Saying this, he glanced at Ah Ming. "We must help you reach Intent Realm. In this cosmos, the laws of the cosmos had the highest chance of reaching Intent Realm. Their foundation was very deep. As long as they had enough grand mist purple gas, it wouldn't be difficult for them to reach Intent Realm. There was also Sister Nian, too, and the Yang family's ancestor." Thinking of this, Yi Xian looked at Little White. "Little White, how much purple gas do you have?" Little White blinked and waved its little paws randomly. Yi Xian looked at Arya. Arya said, "A lot." Yi Xian was somewhat puzzled. "Why is there a lot?" Arya explained, "Because Little White's grand mist purple gas is converted from ordinary spiritual qi." "Converted?" Yi Xian blinked. "In other words, Little White can convert ordinary spiritual qi into grand mist purple gas?" Arya nodded. "Yes. However, if she transforms too much, she will also get tired." Hearing this, Yi Xian and Ah Ming looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. Conversion. What did this mean? It meant that as long as this little guy was here, the grand mist purple gas was infinite. It was truly infinite. This was too outrageous. As long as this little guy was willing, he could convert all the spiritual qi into grand mist purple gas. At this time, Arya suddenly said, "Little White can't convert spiritual qi recklessly." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "Why?" Arya licked the tongue hulu. "Because if Little White converts spiritual qi recklessly, the spiritual qi of this world will be exhausted. For example, she can convert the spiritual qi of this place into grand mist purple gas, but the spiritual qi of this world will be exhausted instantly, and all living things will die. In addition, a large area of ordinary spiritual qi can be converted into a little grand mist purple gas. Strictly speaking, such a conversion was not worth it for this universe. So, Brother Yang doesn't let Little White convert grand mist purple gas recklessly." Yi Xian said softly, "I see. That's right. If this little guy could convert spiritual qi recklessly, and the ratio was 1-to-1, it would be too terrifying. Because it meant that this little guy could change the spiritual qi of the whole world. And the current situation was that although this little guy could also convert the spiritual qi of this world into grand mist purple gas, she could only convert one strand of grand mist purple gas out of 100 strands. This meant that if this little guy converted spiritual qi, a large number of super experts would appear in this world, but all living things below these experts would die. Because the converted grand mist purple gas couldn't support the whole universe." Yi Xian glanced at the little white guy. In fact, this little guy had the ability to destroy the universe. As long as she was willing, she could suck the spiritual qi of this universe dry. This was too terrifying. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's eyes suddenly lit up. He could definitely take this little guy and Arya to the alternate dimension. After going there, this little guy could absorb spiritual qi crazily. At this time, Ah Ming suddenly said, "We can let her go to the alternate dimension. Let them all be annihilated." Yi Xian shook his head with a smile. Unless his father also went to the alternate dimension, this little guy would have no hope of surviving in the alternate dimension. After all, the experts of the alternate dimension would absolutely not let her absorb spiritual qi. Yi Xian collected his thoughts and then looked at Ah Ming. Ah Ming, you gather all the laws, and I will provide you with grand mist purple gas to help you break through. How about it? Ah Ming looked at Little White. Is she willing? Little White nodded, expressing her willingness. Ah Ming shook her head with a smile. She had finally realized. This little guy really treated Yi Xian as one of her own. After a moment, Ah Ming left. Of course, she left with a lot of grand mist purple gas. As Yi Xian had said, the strength of their laws had to reach a higher level. After Ah Ming left, Yi Xian was about to go find his father, but at this time, the green-robed man suddenly appeared in front of him. The green-robed man said with a smile, I can't stay here for too long. Yi Xian was startled. What's the matter? The green-robed man nodded and said with a smile, an old friend of mine found a rather interesting place. I want to take your aunt and the others for a stroll, so, Yi Xian said in a deep voice, can you take me with you? The green-robed man immediately shook his head. Yi Xian was somewhat puzzled. Why can't you take me? The green-robed man glared at Yi Xian. Your father and your aunt and the others are going to have a romantic time. How can you follow them? The two of us can do our own things, understand? Yi Xian's expression froze. Damn it. Am I really your biological son? At this time, the green-robed man said again, I can stay for a few more days. In these few days, I have decided to properly train you. Come, let's go and cultivate. After saying that, everyone disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already on the 99th floor. The world of the 9th floor had been restored. The green-robed man handed his sword to Yi Xian. Practice the sword drawing technique. I will personally guide you. Yi Xian nodded and suddenly slashed with his sword. Qi. A wisp of sword qi pierced through the sky. The sky was directly torn apart, and a huge crack that was tens of thousands of feet long appeared. At this moment, his strength was completely different from before. The power of the sword drawing technique could be said to be extremely terrifying. However, the green-robed man shook his head. Weak. You are really too weak. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man sighed again. My invincible sword skill was actually used like this by you. In the future, when you go out, don't tell people that this sword skill was created by me. It is too embarrassing. Yi Xian was speechless. Damn it, will you die if you don't insult me for a day? The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian and sighed again. Too weak. Yi Xian suddenly laughed. Father, I heard that you were beaten by Qing'er in the past. Is that true? The green-robed man's expression froze. Yi Xian continued. I also heard that you were beaten very badly. Is that true? The green-robed man was speechless. The green-robed man suddenly took out a sword. Come, let's practice in real life. Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. I don't want a ticket. Chapter 1662. Real person sparring. Yi Xian's face darkened. Damn it, this old man really doesn't care about face at all. He's just looking for a reasonable excuse to beat me up. Soon, shrill screams rang out in the world of the 9th floor. At the side, Arya licked her candied haws and shook her head. So tragic. Xiao Bai nodded vigorously and waved her little paws. It was indeed tragic. After a long time, Yi Xian lay on the ground. At this moment, he had no strength left in his body. He couldn't fight back at all. He was beaten up. The man in green sat next to Yi Xian and smiled. How do you feel? Yi Xian rolled his eyes at the man in green. I don't feel anything. The man in green laughed. Kid, don't tell me you really think I'm looking for an excuse to beat you up. Yi Xian said, "Isn't that the case?" The man in green laughed. "That's not the case. I beat you up because I want you to understand some principles." Yi Xian was a little puzzled. "What principles?" The man in green blinked. "Think about it yourself." Yi Xian was speechless. The man in green said seriously, "You have to figure it out yourself." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Figure it out my ass. I just exposed your shortcomings. Damn it. He's such a bully. He can beat me up, but he has to act like he's doing it for your own good. He's too inhumane. Endure it." Yi Xian took a deep breath. "My fists aren't strong enough. I have to endure it." The man in green suddenly looked at Xiaobai. "Heal him." Xiaobai waved its little paws and a pile of purple gas enveloped Yi Xian. After a while, Yi Xian returned to normal. The man in green looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Do you know where the core of the sword drawing technique is?" Yi Xian shook his head. The man in green said, "There are two cores. The first is the sword drawing technique. This sword technique focuses on instantaneous explosive power. The second is overlapping." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Overlapping?" The azure-robed man smiled and said, "Yes. With your current strength, if you can overlap 100 sword drawing techniques in an instant, then you can even kill an expert with an intent realm." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment, then said, "I've only just entered divine sense." The green-robed man knocked on Yi Xian's head. "What do you mean by spirit trance? Don't think about the realm. Come, try it now." Yi Xian nodded. He suddenly unsheathed his sword. The moment he unsheathed his sword, he immediately sheathed it and slashed again. Chi chi. In an instant, 2 strands of sword chi tore through the sky, and the sky was directly torn into pieces. The mountains in the distance were directly transformed into powder. Moreover, even space was torn into nothingness. This time, it was at least twice as powerful as before. However, the green-robed man still shook his head. "No. His strength is not enough, and his speed is not fast enough." Yi Xian blinked. "Not fast enough?" The azure-robed man nodded. "You want to merge the 2 sword energies into one. What do you mean by overlapping?" "Only when 100 strands of sword chi merge into one will it be considered true overlapping." 100 strands of sword chi overlapped. Yi Xian's expression became solemn. He had overlapped 2 strands of sword chi, and the power was already so terrifying. If he overlapped 100 strands, wouldn't he be able to split the world in half? The green-robed man suddenly asked. "Do you think it's very difficult?" Yi Xian nodded. "It's difficult just thinking about it." The green-robed man smiled. "Will it be more difficult than the alien dimension?" Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. The green-robed man lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "There's nothing difficult. It just depends on whether you're willing to do it or not. If you deny yourself before doing it, then you won't be able to do anything." Yi Xian nodded. "I understand." The green-robed man smiled. "Start practicing. I'll guide you." Yi Xian nodded. In the following time, Yi Xian began to practice the sword drawing technique like crazy. He practiced this move. Crazily practicing. One sword after another. At the start, he could barely overlap 2 swords. But gradually, he could overlap 3 swords, for swords. During this period, the green-robed man didn't leave and continued to guide him. It could be said that the main reason why Yi Xian could improve so quickly was because of the green-robed man's guidance. This sword drawing technique was created by the green-robed man. With his guidance, Yi Xian would definitely improve by leaps and bounds. Outside the 99th floor, a woman stood at the entrance of the building. This woman was Hua Yi. She had already been here for 2 days. Just to see Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian was cultivating and wouldn't see anyone. And she had no choice but to wait. Now, some half-step intent realm experts of Endless City had already joined the Cosmos God Court. With the primordial violet chi, these people had a high chance of reaching intent realm. Although it might not happen in a short period of time, as time passes, the gap between Endless City and these people would only get bigger and bigger. And if these people really had intent realm experts outside the city, then Endless City would completely become a little brother. And she had also obtained Yi Xian's information. She already understood Yi Xian's personality and character. In terms of character, there was no problem. He was a trustworthy person. Simply put, Endless City must cling to this thigh. Several days later. In the 9th floor, Yi Xian was still crazily cultivating that sword drawing technique. The more he cultivated, the more excited he got. Because he realized that this sword drawing technique was really terrifying. Especially after overlapping, the power that erupted in that instant could really destroy heaven and earth. And now, he could already overlap 16 sword drawing techniques. 16 sword drawing techniques overlapping. His current sword drawing technique had truly undergone a qualitative change. This slash was enough to kill a deity exterminating realm expert in a second. However, this was not his goal. His goal was to be able to shake intent realm experts. And to shake intent realm experts, he must have the ability to destroy time. However, his current sword drawing technique was still unable to damage the dimension of time. Still not enough. He continued to cultivate crazily. Anyway, with Xiao Bai's primordial violet vapor, no matter how tired he was, he could quickly recover his strength. Time passed bit by bit. During this period, the green-robed man did not leave. He just stood at the side, giving pointers and personally demonstrating. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped. He lay on the ground and completely relaxed. He was exhausted. The sword strike he had performed just now had overlapped with 29 sword drawing techniques. And when this sword slashed out, he immediately felt as if all the strength in his body was sucked out, and he had no strength at all. The green-robed man walked in front of Yi Xian and said with a smile, "Do you feel your limit?" Yi Xian nodded, "It should be my limit." The green-robed man shook his head, "Not yet." Yi Xian was stunned. The green-robed man said with a smile, "You can still do better." Yi Xian asked, "Can still do better?" The green-robed man nodded, "Limit." What is limit? Limits are forced out. You need to force yourself again. Yi Xian was silent. After a moment, he got up and continued to practice. 3 days later, he was able to overlap 30 sword drawing techniques. There was another one. After drawing 30 times in an instant, Yi Xian fell down again. He felt worse than 3 days ago. 3 days ago, he felt as if all the strength in his body was sucked out. This time, he felt as if his whole body was paralyzed. Other than his eyes, he could not move anything else. The green-robed man appeared in front of Yi Xian again. Yi Xian said weakly, "I can't do it anymore." The green-robed man said with a smile, 3 days ago, you also said that you had reached your limit." Yi Xian smiled bitterly, "This time, I have really reached my limit. If I break through my realm, I should be able to go further." The green-robed man shook his head, "It has nothing to do with your realm, it has to do with your state of mind. The current you has completely denied yourself." Yi Xian was a little puzzled, "I have not reached my limit?" The green-robed man said with a smile, "What do you think?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "If I use this sword now, I will be like a cripple." This sword technique is no different from suicide. The green-robed man shook his head, "Don't think about other problems. What you need to think about now is how to reach your limit. Even if you only attack once, you have to reach your limit this time." Yi Xian nodded. The green-robed man looked at Xiao Bai, "Heal him." Xiao Bai waved its little paw again, and a purple aura enveloped Yi Xian. Soon, his body returned to normal. Just as Yi Xian was about to attack, the green-robed man suddenly said, "Don't you notice anything different?" Yi Xian was stunned and asked, "What's different?" The green-robed man smiled, "Your body." Yi Xian looked at his body, his eyes filled with doubt. "It's still a dimensional body." The green-robed man shook his head, "Silly son, didn't you notice that your physical strength has become stronger?" Hearing this, Yi Xian was stunned. That's right. He had actually neglected the strength of his own body. How could he draw his sword 30 times in an instant? One of the main reasons was that his physical strength had become stronger. Moreover, it was not just an ordinary level of strength. He discovered that he had become much stronger. His physical strength was much, much stronger than before. The green-robed man continued, "During this period, every time you break through your limit, your physical strength will also break through. Your physical strength is now at least twice as strong as before. Your physical strength can become even stronger, and your sword drawing technique can also become stronger." Yi Xian took a deep breath. "Continue." With that, he began to draw his sword again. The green-robed man walked to the side and sat down, looking at Yi Xian in the distance, a trace of a smile on his face. Actually, he was really envious of Yi Xian. After all, he had not enjoyed such treatment in the past. Thinking of someone, the smile on the green-robed man's face disappeared. Another month passed. Yi Xian could already overlap 42 sword-drawing techniques. 42 sword-drawing techniques. Now, every time he swung his sword, the space within hundreds of thousands of miles would become more illusory. Beside him, Arya suddenly said, "Brother Yang, when are we leaving?" The green-robed man smiled, "Soon. Soon." Arya glanced at Yi Xian in the distance. "Are you really not taking little Xuanzi away?" The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian in the distance, and after a moment, he said softly, "He has to walk his own path. Following me is not helping him, but harming him." Chapter 1663. The green-robed man knew very well that Yi Xian would never be able to grow if he followed him. Only Yi Xian could surpass him in the future. Otherwise, with his protection, Yi Xian would always be a child. Arya sighed softly, "What's a pity?" The green-robed man looked at Arya, "What's a pity?" Arya said seriously, "If little Xuanzi were with us, it would be fun." Lil Bai kept nodding. She liked Yi Xian, too. He was to her liking. They were on the same side. The green-robed man was speechless. If these three little fellows teamed up, would there still be peace in this world? Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. At this moment, Yi Xian could already overlap 50 sword-drawing techniques. Under his crazy cultivation, his physical body had also been greatly improved. His physical strength was much stronger than before. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. At this moment, he felt that his right arm was filled with endless power. Right now, he could easily kill a deity exterminating realm powerhouse. He could even kill a half-step will realm powerhouse. 50 overlapped sword-drawing techniques could really destroy heaven and earth. However, there was a drawback. After using this sword, he could not use a second sword. With this sword, it was either you die or I die. After resting for a while, Yi Xian was about to cultivate again. At this moment, the green-robed man suddenly said, "There's no need." Yi Xian looked at the green-robed man. The green-robed man smiled and said, "You have now reached the limit of your physical body. Although you can still improve by cultivating, the effect is minimal." Yi Xian blinked. "Is it over?" The green-robed man shook his head. "Just started." As he spoke, he looked at Arya. "Give me some blood." Arya glanced at Yi Xian. She hesitated for a moment and then pointed with her fingers. A drop of blood fell in front of Yi Xian. Arya's blood. The green-robed man was a little helpless. "Give me more." Arya blinked. That hurts. The green-robed man smiled and said, no need for too much. Arya thought for a moment and then bit her fingertip. Soon, blood gushed out from her fingertip. The green-robed man waved his right hand and the blood floated in front of Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian and said, eat it. Yi Xian asked, do you want to help me strengthen my body? The green-robed man nodded. Your current physical body is not strong enough. If you want to overlap 100 sword drawing techniques, you have to become stronger. Yi Xian was a little puzzled. Why didn't you strengthen my body first? The green-robed man shook his head and smiled. If I had strengthened your physical body from the start, then you wouldn't have been able to break through the limits of your physical body. Right now, you have already reached the limit of your physical body. If you break through the limit of your physical body now, then you will have an unexpected harvest. Yi Xian still wanted to ask something, but the green-robed man suddenly said, what's with all this nonsense? As he spoke, he pointed with his fingers, and Arya's blood directly entered Yi Xian's throat. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian's body directly erupted with an extremely terrifying power. It was not his power, but the power of Arya's blood. The green-robed man gently patted Yi Xian's shoulder with his right hand, and that power was directly suppressed. The green-robed man said, how do you feel now? Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I feel that there is a fire burning in my body. The green-robed man nodded, don't suppress it. Let it continue to burn. This is the power of Arya's blood. It can temper your body. Yi Xian said, it's very uncomfortable. The green-robed man smiled and said, how can it not be uncomfortable to cultivate the physical body? Just bear with it. Yi Xian nodded. He found that under the burning of Arya's blood, his body was gradually changing. As time passed, a faint blood-red flame appeared on Yi Xian's body. Yi Xian's face also became a little twisted. Pain. He felt that Arya's blood was corroding his body, from the inside out. However, he still forced himself to bear with it. I can't embarrass myself in front of this bastard of a father. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and said with a smile, how do you feel now? Yi Xian said with a trembling voice, I'm fine. The green-robed man's mouth slightly curled up, that's good. As he said, he took out a white jade bottle. Yi Xian suddenly felt that something was wrong. This is? The green-robed man smiled and said, this is some good stuff that I specially found for you. Come, open your mouth. Yi Xian hesitated and then said, why don't we slow down first? The green-robed man laughed and scolded, slow your ass. Eat it. As he said, he pinched Yi Xian's mouth with one hand and held the white jade bottle with the other hand. He aimed it at Yi Xian's mouth and poured some black flames suddenly into Yi Xian's body. Boom! In an instant, Yi Xian's eyes opened wide, awe. At this moment, Yi Xian felt that he was going to die on the spot. His body was being annihilated inch by inch. Yi Xian couldn't help but say, damn, Dad, are you trying to kill me? Annihilation. This was no joke. When he saw this scene, the green-robed man placed his right hand lightly on Yi Xian's shoulder. Boom! Something in Yi Xian's body seemed to be suppressed, and his body started to return to normal. However, there was another black flame on his body. Pain. At this moment, Yi Xian was in extreme pain. Although his body was not being annihilated, the burning pain still existed. This was even more terrifying than death. It was truly a life worse than death. The green-robed man smiled and said, is it very painful? If you can't stand it, then cry out. I won't laugh at you. Yi Xian was speechless. A wisp of sword energy suddenly broke through the air. Boom! In an instant, the entire world began to shatter. 96 sword drawing techniques. Yi Xian looked at the shattered world in front of him and was dumbfounded. 96 sword drawing techniques. Had he become so strong? The green-robed man said softly, "This sword of yours is enough to destroy the time dimension. However, it is only the time dimension of ordinary people." Yi Xian looked at the green-robed man. "There are different types of time dimension?" The green-robed man smiled and said, "The stronger the person, the stronger his time dimension." "Do you understand?" Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Dad, do you also have a time dimension?" The green-robed man smiled and said, "Nonsense. Everyone has their own time dimension." Yi Xian was a little curious. "Can you go to the future?" The green-robed man shook his head and smiled. "Why would I go to the future?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Aren't you curious about the future?" The green-robed man walked in front of Yi Xian and gently patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "It is because the future is uncertain that a person's life is meaningful. If you knew your future in advance, wouldn't it be especially boring?" Yi Xian said softly, "That's true." The green-robed man continued, "Moreover, going to the future is extremely risky because the future is uncertain. For example, a person might be a rich person in the future, but because he can foresee it in advance, he might not struggle. And if he doesn't struggle, his life's fate will change. Because the future is uncertain, any choice a person makes, or even a thought, will produce a different future. Do you understand?" Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." The green-robed man smiled and said, "I will bring you to the last place. After that, Dad will be leaving." Yi Xian was a little curious. "What place?" The green-robed man smiled and said, "A rather mysterious place. Dad will give you one last gift, then we will say goodbye. You play, I play, and no one will disturb each other." Yi Xian was speechless. P.S. Please tip. Chapter 1664. After leaving the 99th floor, Yi Xian saw Hua Yi. This Hua Yi had been waiting here for months. Seeing Yi Xian, Hua Yi immediately greeted him with a smile, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian smiled, "Is there anything I can help you with, Miss Hua?" Hua Yi bowed slightly, "Young Master Yi, I'm here to apologize." Yi Xian smiled, "I'm not angry." Hua Yi hesitated for a moment, then said, "Young Master Yi, are you really not angry?" Yi Xian smiled, "It's fake." Hua Yi smiled bitterly and bowed again, "Young Master Yi, I sincerely want to join the Cosmos God Court. I hope young Master Yi will approve it." Yi Xian didn't say anything. Hua Yi said again, "I'll adjust my attitude later." Yi Xian glanced at Hua Yi, "Miss Hua, can you really represent the entire Endless City?" Hua Yi smiled, "Young Master Yi can rest assured about this." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I'm just worried." Hua Yi said solemnly, "Young Master Yi, rest assured. That kind of thing will never happen again." Yi Xian looked at Hua Yi, "Let me think about it." Hua Yi, Yi Xian looked at the green-robed man, "Dad, let's go." The green-robed man nodded slightly, "All right." Watching Yi Xian and the others leave, Hua Yi sighed softly. She naturally knew what Yi Xian meant. Yi Xian was telling her that he didn't necessarily need her endless city. She shouldn't think too highly of herself. After a moment, Hua Yi suddenly smiled. Actually, Yi Xian didn't refuse this time, which meant that Endless City had a chance. A great chance. Hua Yi turned and left. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Dad, can you introduce me to the friend you mentioned earlier?" The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian. "What are you going to do?" Yi Xian smiled, "Just to get to know him." The green-robed man sneered, "Don't think I don't know what you're up to." Yi Xian, the green-robed man said, "Let's talk about your body. Your body should be at the intent realm now. Ordinary intent realm experts can't break it. But that doesn't mean you're invincible. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian nodded, "Understood." The green-clothed man smiled and said, "Remember, don't rely too much on your physical body. It's best if you don't use your physical body to resist. Because if you encounter a true expert, using your physical body to resist is equivalent to courting death. Understand? Yi Xian nodded. I will. The green-robed man smiled. The power of this sword-drawing technique has no upper limit. No, it should be said that its upper limit depends on you. So, if you have time in the future, practice more. When you can stack up to 1,000, you'll find that any intent realm or alien race is trash. Yi Xian blinked. 1,000? The green-robed man smiled. Is it very difficult? Yi Xian nodded. For me now, it is indeed very difficult. The green-robed man patted Yi Xian's shoulder lightly. It can't be done in one go. Take it slow. Yi Xian said in a deep voice. What other aspects do I need to improve? The green-robed man smiled. Many areas. Yi Xian. Soon, the group arrived in front of the city gate. An old man stood at the city gate. The old man wore a loose black robe and held a strange walking stick in his hand. Seeing the green-robed man, the old man immediately walked over and smiled. Brother Yang. The green-robed man smiled. Brother Mu, you came a little early. The old man smiled. I was eager to see a friend. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly bowed slightly. Hello, Uncle Mu. Hearing this, the old man looked at Yi Xian, sized up Yi Xian, and smiled. A dragon among men. The green-robed man smiled. Brother Mu, I'll get straight to the point. This little fellow is a little weak now, so I want to borrow your holy land. Elder Mu smiled. No problem. Let's go. The green-robed man nodded, waved his right hand, and everyone disappeared on the spot. Very soon, Yi Xian felt everything in front of him being torn apart. Needless to say, he was quite shocked at this moment. He knew that his father was bringing him through space. Moreover, this speed was too terrifying. If it wasn't for the protection of his father's sword energy, his current physical body would probably be unable to resist it. Thinking of this, Yi Xian couldn't help but glance at the green-robed man. Should I be more obedient in the future? Right at this moment, the green-robed man suddenly smiled. We're here. As soon as he finished speaking, the surroundings returned to normal. At this moment, they were already on top of a huge rock. Not far in front of them, there was a huge mountain that was suspended in the air. The mountain was at least 10,000 zhang high, directly above the clouds. Most importantly, this kind of mountain was suspended in the air. Besides that, there were countless other mountains that floated behind the mountain, and it was impossible to see the end of them. It was a magnificent sight. Meanwhile, Elder Mu suddenly looked up at the top of the mountain. Welcome the guests. His voice resounded through the world. Meanwhile, an enormous path of light that was over 3 kilometers wide poured down from the top of the mountain to their feet. At the same time, over 100 experts in golden armor suddenly appeared on both sides of the path of light, and all of them turned around and bowed respectfully to the green-robed man and the others. The green-robed man glanced at Elder Mu with slight helplessness. All these fancy things. Elder Mu roared with laughter. It's just a formality. Let's go. All of them walked towards the top of the mountain, and an enormous ancient city appeared before them when they arrived at the top of the mountain. Yi Xian looked up at the sky above the city gates, and there were 3 large words there. Heaven-splitting city. After entering the city, the streets were at least 300 kilometers wide, and there were countless people gathered on both sides of the streets. These people were all curiously sizing up Yi Xian and the others. Heaven-splitting city. The path of light welcomed the guests. Such treatment had not been seen for thousands of years. Who was it? At this moment, an elder suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian and the others, and he bowed slightly. Greetings, Elder Mu. Greetings, sect leader Yang. Elder Mu nodded. Make the arrangements. Little friendy wants to use the sacred land. Hearing this, the elder immediately looked troubled. This, Elder Mu frowned slightly. Is there a problem? The elder hurriedly said, No. It's just that Ah Mulian is using the sacred land now. Ah Mulian. Hearing this, the elder was stunned, and then fell silent. Ah Mulyen. The most monstrous genius in the history of the Heaven-Splitting clan. Her position in the Heaven-Splitting clan was extremely special, as her bloodline had mutated since she was born, and this mutation had caused the bloodline of everyone in the Heaven-Splitting clan to break through. This breakthrough had caused the overall strength of the Heaven-Splitting clan to rise greatly. It could be said that Mulyen's position in the Heaven-Splitting clan was higher than his, the clan leader. Because she was the future hope of the Heaven-Splitting clan. This time, Elder Mu was in a difficult position. At this moment, the green-robed man suddenly smiled. It's all right, we'll just wait. Elder Mu was a little apologetic. Brother Yang. The green-robed man smiled. It's no big deal. Elder Mu cupped his fists. Thank you. The green-robed man looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Let's go. Let's go for a walk and have a chat. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Arya suddenly said, Brother Yang, can we go play by ourselves? The green-robed man glared at Arya. No. Of course, he knew what this little girl was thinking. Xiao Bai had definitely sensed some treasure again, and the two little fellows wanted to go and touch it. In Xiao Bai's world, as long as the treasure followed her, it would not be considered stealing or stealing. In Arya's world, if she took the treasure, she would be borrowing it. As for whether she would return it or not, she had never considered it. Who said that one had to return something borrowed? The green-robed man felt a headache when he heard the messy thoughts of the two little fellows. Arya pouted when she saw that the green-robed man did not agree. She looked at Xiao Bai and shrugged. Brother Yang is very wary of us now. What should we do? Lil White blinked, then pointed its little paw at Yi Xian in the distance. Arya thought for a moment and said, You can have that thought. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man looked at Elder Mu and smiled. I'll take this little fellow for a walk. You go ahead. Elder Mu hesitated for a moment and nodded. Call me if you need anything. The green-robed man nodded. All right. Elder Mu cupped his fists and retreated. The green-robed man led Yi Xian and the others into the distance. Along the way, the green-robed man smiled and said, Are you curious about this place? Yi Xian nodded. The green-robed man smiled and said, This is the Heaven-Opening clan. Do you remember that I once told you that there is a bloodline that is very special, even more special than the immortal bloodline? Yi Xian nodded. Is it the Heaven-Opening clan? The green-robed man nodded. Heaven-Opening bloodline. It is a rather special bloodline. Of course, it is not as powerful as our Yang family's crazy demon bloodline. Yi Xian was speechless. The green-robed man continued, Their holy land is very interesting. It is a place that specializes in cultivation and has a special cultivation method. If you can cultivate there for a period of time, your strength will definitely improve greatly. Yi Xian was a little curious. Dad, what kind of clan is the Heaven-Opening clan? The green-robed man smiled. Pioneers. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Pioneers? The green-robed man nodded. This clan is a little interesting. Their ancestors' goal was to lead their clansmen into the boundless universe, in other words, to explore. As he spoke, he looked around. Do you know what this place is? Yi Xian shook his head. The green-robed man smiled. The Heaven-Opening realm, a world far away from your universe. Although this place is not as special as the alternate dimension, it is not simple either. Yi Xian asked, How is it not simple? The green-robed man smiled. Do you know why the Heaven-Opening clan did not continue to explore and instead stayed here? Yi Xian shook his head. The green-robed man smiled, because there are many unexplored ancient ruins in the deepest part of the mountain range. The Heaven-Opening clan stayed here to eat these ancient ruins. However, even after exploring for hundreds of thousands of years, they have only explored less than 1/10 of it. Yi Xian blinked. Dad, have you been there before? The green-robed man laughed. Yes, I have. Yi Xian asked, What is there? The green-robed man smiled. If you are curious, you can go there yourself in the future. That place does not attract me. As he said this, he paused, then said, if you go, remember to tell me my name. Otherwise, I am afraid you will be gone. Yi Xian. Chapter 1665. A relic. Yi Xian looked into the distance. He had decided to make a trip there. A relic that the heaven-splitting race valued was definitely not ordinary. The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian and smiled. Young man, this world is huge. It's not just the other dimensional people. You, then, he shook his head. Forget it. Let's not talk about this. Yi Xian felt helpless. Is there anything you can't say? The green-robed man smiled. You're too weak now. You won't understand even if I tell you. Yi Xian said seriously, Father, were you young? The green-robed man was stunned. Of course. Yi Xian asked again, were you weak when you were young? The green-robed man did not say anything. Yi Xian smiled and did not say anything. The green-robed man shook his head and smiled. I'm not trying to discourage you. It's just that there are many things that you shouldn't come into contact with given your strength. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The green-robed man smiled. You're not going to continue asking? If you really want to know, I can tell you too. Yi Xian shook his head. I only want to improve myself now. The green-robed man nodded and smiled. All right. At this moment, a woman suddenly showed up not far away from Yi Xian and the others. The lady was wearing a long white robe. Her long hair draped over her shoulders and her hands were hidden in her sleeves. Beautiful. That was Yi Xian's first thought. The lady's skin was very white, especially her eyes. They were big and watery, as if they could suck people in. She was a lady that one would never forget at a glance. The lady looked at the green-robed man and bowed. Senior. At that moment, Elder Mu also appeared. Elder Mu cupped his fists at the green-robed man. Brother Yang, this is Mulyan. She came out earlier after learning that you wanted to use the sacred land. The green-robed man smiled and looked at Mulyan. Thank you. Mulyan bowed again. I'm fated to meet you today. I hope you can give me some pointers. I'll be very grateful. The azure-robed man sized up Mulyan and smiled, I can't guide you. Hearing this, Amu Lian was slightly taken aback, and then her expression dimmed. The azure-robed man smiled and said, however, I can let you feel what it means to be powerful. Mulyan immediately bowed. Senior, please make your move. The green-robed man laughed heartily, what a smart little girl. She's as outstanding as my son. Yi Xian was a little embarrassed. Dad, although I think I'm very outstanding, you still have to be tactful in front of outsiders. I also want to save face. The green-robed man laughed and said, outstanding is outstanding, what's the point of being tactful? Let me tell you, your father is the most outstanding man in the world, and you are the second most outstanding man in the world. The two of us are the most outstanding men in the entire universe. Everyone, Arya suddenly pulled Xiaobai aside. She looked up at the sky, as if she didn't know these two. Elder Mu looked a little embarrassed. This brother Yang was good at everything, but sometimes he was shameless. Mulyan glanced at Yi Xian, but she didn't say anything. Meanwhile, the green-robed man walked over to Mulyan, and he sized her up. He smiled and said, Miss, watch carefully. As he spoke, he suddenly swung his sword. The sword stabbed straight at the center of Mulyan's brows. It was a very simple strike. There was no sword chi. There was no sword intent. There wasn't even a trace of sword light. However, it was such a simple strike that caused Mulyan's expression to change drastically. She wanted to resist, but there was a thought in her mind at this moment. Unbeatable. This strike is unbeatable. Death is certain. Mulyan slowly closed her eyes. The sword stopped half an inch away from the center of Mulyan's brows. The green-robed man sheathed his sword and smiled, but he didn't say anything. A short moment later, Mulyan opened her eyes and bowed slightly. "Thank you, Senior." The green-robed man glanced at Yi Xian, and then he said, "Miss, my son might not be very familiar with your sacred grounds. I wonder if you can take him there to familiarize him with it." Yi Xian, Mulyan glanced at Yi Xian, and nodded slightly. Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors above, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From this moment onward, Yi Xian's position as crown prince shall be removed, and Yi Lang shall succeed him. The speaker was an old man in a black robe. Not far behind the old man stood a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. "Why?" At this moment, a somewhat timid voice suddenly resounded in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. The little girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian from his position, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned. "Yi Ling, what are you doing?" The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, "Great elder, my brother Yi Xian is a crown prince. Why did you remove his title for no reason?" The great elder looked coldly at Yi Ling. "This is a matter of the clan. Why are you interrupting? Leave." Yi Ling was obviously afraid, and did not dare to look at the great elder, but she did not leave. Instead, she plucked up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She once again bowed to the elders on both sides. "Elders, my brother is fighting with the Li clan over the mining rights at Nanshan. He is fighting for the clan, and his life is uncertain. But the clan is using a groundless excuse to remove his position as crown prince. This is really unfair. Impudent." The great elder suddenly raged. "Whether he is removed or not, it is not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away." At this moment, the newly appointed crown prince Yi Lang suddenly laughed. "You should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others." The great elder said coldly, "Then flog 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists, and said angrily, "This is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years, and even now he is fighting for the clan, but the clan is so unfair to him." One of the guards glanced at the newly appointed crown prince Yi Lang, and he knew that this was his chance to show off. The guard sneered, "Young master Yi Lang inherits the position of crown prince, and it is everyone's wish. What are you shouting for?" With that, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. But she did not cry, and just covered her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard, and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "I'm Zhang Mu, greeting the crown prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the crown prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed, and hurriedly bowed deeply. "I will go through fire and water for the crown prince, and I will do anything for you." Yi Lang nodded slightly. "Drag him out. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall, so don't show any mercy, understand?" Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang, and when he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. Immediately, he grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to have seen something, and he suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe, and the robe was tattered, and there was blood everywhere. This person was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from the South Mountain. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's mouth curled into a cold smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, and his expression was frighteningly dark. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. Who gave you the guts to touch my sister? When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He quickly looked at Yi Lang, and was about to speak, when Yi Xian suddenly leaped in front of him like a ferocious tiger. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pang! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, Yi Xian, he's my man, how dare you? Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him, and snarled, your man? As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, Prince, save me. Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's appearance, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being sliced by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed out, brother, it hurts, it hurts. Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu, and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pang! Qingcheng, Yi Clan, Ancestral Hall. Ancestors, Yi Xian has no talent, no virtue. From now on, Yi Xian's position as prince shall be replaced by Yi Lang. The one who spoke was an old man in black robes. Not far behind the old man, there was a youth with a faint smile on his face. This person was Yi Lang. On both sides were the Yi clan's elders. Why? At this time, a timid voice rang out in the ancestral hall. Everyone turned to look and saw a little girl standing at the door. She was about 12 or 13 years old, and her hands were tightly gripping the hem of her skirt. Her face had a sickly pallor, and she looked a little weak. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. This girl was called Yi Ling, and she was Yi Xian's younger sister. When she heard that the clan wanted to remove Yi Xian, she disregarded her illness and rushed over. The black-robed old man frowned, Yi Ling, what are you doing? The little girl called Yi Ling bowed to the people in the ancestral hall, and said timidly, Great Elder, my brother Yi Xian is a prince, why did you discard him for no reason? The great elder looked at Yi Ling coldly, this is a matter of the clan, why are you interrupting? Leave. Yi Ling was clearly a little fearful. She did not dare to look the great elder in the eye, but she did not leave. Instead, she mustered up her courage and walked into the ancestral hall. She bowed to the elders on both sides of the hall and said, Elders, my brother is currently fighting with the Li family for the mining rights of the mine in Nanshan. He is now fighting for the family, and it is unknown whether he is alive or dead. However, the family has used a groundless excuse to remove his position as the crown prince. Impudent. The great elder suddenly raged, discard him or not, it's not up to a little girl like you to decide. Men, drag her away. At this time, the new prince, Yi Lang, suddenly laughed, you should be flogged 30 times as a warning to others. The great elder replied coldly, then flog her 30 times. Soon, 2 guards of the Yi clan rushed in. Yi Ling clenched her fists and said angrily, this is unfair. My brother has risked his life for the clan for so many years. Even now, he is risking his life for the clan. The clan is so unfair to him. One of the guards glanced at the new prince, Yi Lang. He knew that this was his chance to shine. The guard sneered, young master Yi Lang inherits the position of prince. What are you yelling about? As he spoke, he raised his hand and slapped Yi Ling's face. Slap. A crisp slap sounded, and the right side of Yi Ling's face instantly swelled up. However, she did not cry. She only held her cheek tightly. Yi Lang looked at the guard and smiled. "What's your name?" The guard hurriedly bowed. "Subordinate Zhang Mu greets the prince." Yi Lang nodded. "You're not bad. After I become the prince, I will need 10 guards. You can be my guard from now on." Hearing this, Zhang Mu was overjoyed. He hurriedly bowed deeply. This subordinate is willing to go through fire and water for the prince. Yi Lang nodded. "Drag him away. This person is disturbing the ancestral hall. Don't hold back." "Understood." Zhang Mu glanced at Yi Lang. When he saw the murderous intent in Yi Lang's eyes, he understood. He immediately grabbed Yi Ling's hair and dragged her out. At this moment, Zhang Mu seemed to see something and suddenly stopped. In the ancestral hall, everyone turned their heads to look outside. Not far from the ancestral hall, a young man was walking towards the ancestral hall. The young man was wearing a tight-fitting robe. The robe was tattered and covered in blood. The young man was Yi Xian, who had rushed back from Nanshan. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Lang's lips curled into a sinister smile. Inside the ancestral hall, the elders frowned. The great elder narrowed his eyes, his face dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking. From afar, when Yi Xian saw Zhang Mu dragging Yi Ling, his face turned savage. "Who gave you the guts to touch my sister?" When Zhang Mu saw Yi Xian, his face changed. He hurriedly looked at Yi Lang and was about to speak. At this time, Yi Xian was like a ferocious tiger leaping in front of him. Before the latter could react, Yi Xian's fist landed on his face. Pung! Zhang Mu felt a wave of dizziness, and he stumbled and fell. However, Yi Ling did not stop there. He charged towards Zhang Mu again. At this time, Yi Lang suddenly roared, "Yi Xian, he's my man. How dare you!" Yi Xian suddenly stepped on Zhang Mu's chest. Pooh! Zhang Mu spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Yi Lang's face turned ugly. Yi Xian looked up at him and snarled, "Your man?" As he spoke, he stepped on Zhang Mu's face. Zhang Mu's face turned into a bloody mess, as he screamed, "Prince, save me!" Yi Xian did not care about Zhang Mu, as he walked to Yi Ling's side. Seeing Yi Ling's state, Yi Xian felt as though his heart was being cut by a knife. He clenched his fists, and his entire body trembled. When Yi Ling saw Yi Xian, her tears flowed. "Brother, it hurts, it hurts." Hearing this, Yi Xian's expression turned savage. In the next instant, he charged in front of Zhang Mu and kicked Zhang Mu's head. Pung! You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.